In just 10 years, the Eastern Federation Kingdom will collapse, crushed by the weight of the 5 great sins, until nothing remains but ruin. And somehow I'm the one tasked with stopping it. I became their overseer, even though I never imagined this responsibility would turn into something so overwhelming. Before all of this, I was just an ordinary man stuck in modern life. 78 hours a week, endless work, barely any rest. Then fate took a sharp turn. I woke up in the body of a noble in a fantasy world. At first, it felt like a dream, but that illusion shattered almost immediately. I couldn't read. I had no magic, no power, not even the basics. When I tried to understand the written language, I ended up holding a book upside down, leaving the butler staring at me in complete silence. Dinner didn't help much either. A maid brought out a luxurious feast, and I dug in without hesitation, enjoying every bite like it was my reward for surviving my old life. Later, even the bath was prepared for me. In that moment, I couldn't deny it. Being the young master of a count's household felt like pure bliss. Pampered, carefree, it felt like heaven, but there was one massive problem. I had no idea where I actually was. Usually, when someone gets transported to another world, it's a story or a game they recognize. When one of the maids casually mentions that his older brothers, Leo and Tonio, will be returning tomorrow, he's completely baffled. The maid, in turn, is surprised that he seems to have forgotten his own family. As he mulls over their names, something clicks. They sound painfully familiar, then it hits him like lightning. He's in the world of Psychedelia, a turn-based RPG he used to play during his rare moments of free time. But there's a catch. In every possible storyline of Psychedelia, once the 5 great sins, wrath, greed, sloth, pride, and obsession, emerge, the kingdom's nobility and cities fall into madness and destruction. And the Palacio family, where he now finds himself, is infamous in one of the game's early side quests. The eldest son, Leo Palacio, is dubbed the king of prostitutes. The second son, Tonio, is known as the king of drugs. The moment he realizes this, he drops to his knees. He remembers this place vividly. It's the very first subquest of the game. Looking around, he sees that the mansion is exactly how it appeared in Psychedelia. The Palacio household is destined to be among the first noble families wiped out by the 5 great sins, and his current identity is the third son, Alan Palacio, a minor villain who meets a terrible end. His face remains blank as the truth sinks in. Even after realizing that his death is inevitable, the only thing that crosses his mind is how much experience that quest used to give in the game. Later that night, lying in bed, he's too scared to even close his eyes. Honestly, he'd rather go back to his soul-crushing corporate job. At least there, his life wasn't on a timer. The thought that his luxurious new life will end in exactly 10 years terrifies him more than 6 months of unpaid wages ever could. Still, he refuses to give up. Since he already knows the future events of this world, maybe he can use that knowledge to his advantage. If he can somehow change fate and prevent the rise of the 5 sins, he could save both the kingdom and his own peaceful life. It sounds doable. After all, those sins are still just children right now. The real problem is that he has no abilities whatsoever. How could someone powerless change destiny? 2 months later, he manages to pull off his first major move, though not by his own hand. His knight, Evan, successfully rescues a group of orphans from a human experimentation facility. Evan reports that he has left the rescued children in the care of a girl named Yusha. The young master nods in approval, glad he chose Evan for the task. The knight has proven himself capable and trustworthy. However, because his master's face rarely shows emotion anymore, Evan can't tell whether that nod is praise or mere indifference. Trying to clarify, the young master forces an awkward smile, which only makes Evan think he'll never get used to his lord's new demeanor. He remembers how Alan used to be easy to read, cheerful or gloomy, his emotions always visible. Now he seems eerily expressionless. Even the protagonist suspects that possessing Alan's body may have left his facial expressions frozen. Still uncertain, Evan decides to accept the gesture as praise. The protagonist reflects that Evan is one of the rare honest souls in the corrupt world of Psychedelia, a loyal knight who never betrays those he serves. That's why he recruited him immediately upon meeting him. Finally, Evan reminds him that the main reason he was sent to the testing facility was to save Yusha. The young master confirms that's correct. Evan remarks that he understands why his master went out of his way to save the girl. Even with all his years of experience as a mercenary, he can tell that Yusha is no ordinary child. Her strength alone makes it difficult to fathom why she ever allowed herself to be imprisoned in the first place. He then questions why the young master didn't bring her back to the manor, pointing out that keeping someone like her in an orphanage seems wasteful. The protagonist agrees out loud, but his true thoughts are very different. He knows it may look like he's ignoring her potential, but leaving her there is part of his larger plan. Yusha isn't human. In the original timeline of the game, she forms a pact with a being from another realm and eventually becomes the physical incarnation of Wrath, one of the 5 great sins responsible for countless deaths. Thanks to his interference, that dark fate has been diverted. He wants her to grow up peacefully, far away from corruption. To him, that means he has successfully neutralized one of the 4 remaining disasters. Of course, he can't tell Evan any of this, so he chooses to act cryptically and simply says, "The time isn't right yet." Ever curious, Evan wonders what his master means, but he doesn't pry. After all, he promised to respect his lord's wishes. The young noble then instructs Evan to keep the matter quiet and ensure the orphanage receives enough funding for a comfortable life. He also hands him a letter asking him to deliver it personally to Yusha. When Evan asks what the letter contains, his master brushes it off, claiming it's just a note to check on her well-being. He says he wants to reassure the girl after everything she's been through. Evan nods, vows to deliver it promptly, and rides off on horseback. Once alone, the young master wonders whether the letter will truly bring her comfort. In truth, it contains something entirely different. A few lines he remembers from the game. Back then, when Yusha had already become the embodiment of wrath and was laying waste to the kingdom, the Archbishop mentioned a strange phrase, a spell capable of reaching a non-human like her. It went something like, agony of the dark, impassivity of the bright, belonging with the fall. He never fully understood its meaning, but in the game, those words briefly resonated with her before she killed the Archbishop. It wasn't that the spell failed, it had simply come too late. By then, her rage had already consumed everything before peace ever had a chance to take root. Now, our protagonist believes that by sending those same words early, he might truly change her destiny this time. With wrath handled, at least for now, he's ready to move on to the next of the great sins. Still, he can't help but think how absurd it sounds to try befriending a potential monster with a single poetic quote. Yet considering that these sins all seem to worship some mysterious higher entity, maybe there's something to it. To him, they all seem like fanatics. Meanwhile, we shift to Yusha, who is reading the letter herself and she's not happy. Evan, watching from the side, can feel an immense surge of mana radiating from her small frame. It's beyond belief. He admits to himself that she might be the strangest person he's ever met. Her face is emotionless, her voice calm, yet her power screams otherwise. She asks Evan to confirm whether the young master truly wrote the letter. When he nods, she explodes with fury. Her mana flares like a storm, the sheer force enough to terrify even a seasoned warrior like Evan. Manifesting mana in tangible form like this is something only master-level individuals can achieve. Her anger is unrestrained, almost like that of a jealous lover denied attention. In desperation, Evan recalls his master's words that it simply wasn't time yet and blurts them out. Miraculously, the line works. Yusha stills. She interprets the phrase in the letter as a hidden message meant only for her, a secret promise she believes only her master could have made. Evan stands there, speechless, completely lost as to what's happening. Yusha, still wrapped in her eerie devotion, declares that she understands him perfectly. Her demeanor is chillingly intense, giving off a distinctly Yandere-like presence. She is, after all, the daughter of monsters. The bloody Queen Yusha, destined to embody wrath. Back at the manor, our main character feels confident that he's bought himself more time to enjoy his comfortable life. As he drifts off to sleep, he imagines the bright moon smiling down at him in silent encouragement. Before lying down, he places a primrose flower on his bed, thinking it's just a cute decoration. All he really wants is to live peacefully and luxuriously. Is that really too much to ask? Unbeknownst to him, in the Asteria Kingdom, primrose flowers are used in funeral rites, placed on the wounds or graves of the deceased. Symbolically, it's a terrible omen. The next morning, he's in the library, buried under falling books that seem determined to punish him for his illiteracy. He's currently researching the third sin, or as he likes to call them, the landmines. The process is frustrating beyond belief. Soon after, Evan returns and reports that they've successfully rescued another child thanks to the young master's directions. When asked, our protagonist makes sure the child was treated gently after being saved from an underground slave market. Evan assures him that she was, but before their conversation can continue, the library doors slam open with a deafening crash, sending papers flying everywhere. The intruder is Tonio, the second son of the Palacio family. He immediately begins mocking his younger brother, demanding to know how an illiterate fool like him dares to hold a book. Our boy, expressionless as always, simply stares back. Tonio's taunting escalates, but Alan decides it isn't worth the effort. Playing it cool, he says that Tonio can use the library if he wants, and that he'll be taking his leave. Thinking he's asserted dominance, Tonio grinds his heel onto his brother's head with a smug grin. Before things can go any further, a knife suddenly whistles through the air, lodging itself into the wall beside them. A new voice cuts through the tension, scolding them for being too loud. The newcomer is Leo, the eldest son of the family. As Leo, Palacio, and Tonio begin bickering, our protagonist takes the opportunity to quietly crawl away, completely unbothered. He remembers that in the game, the Palacio family was wiped out early on, but seeing them in person, he realizes just how powerful and dangerous they truly are. The two brothers are constantly at each other's throats, fighting over who will become head of the household. Leo controls the city's underground prostitution network, earning the title King of Desire, while Tonio runs the region's largest drug cartel, known as the King of Drugs. Watching them fight, the young master decides there's absolutely no point getting tangled in their mess if he wants to preserve his comfortable lifestyle. And so, with his usual deadpan expression, he literally crawls away from the chaos, while Evan calmly follows as if this absurd escape is the most normal thing in the world. As Evan adjusts his young master's hair, our boy silently vows to live happily, even if it means remaining a powerless, incompetent, illegitimate son. A bit later, Evan comments that the second child they rescued didn't seem like an ordinary kid either. Watching his master lazily recline in his chair, Evan can't help but question reality itself. How could a man like this, someone who constantly complains and seems incapable of serious work, possibly have knowledge of illegal slave markets and secret human experiments scattered across the kingdom? Evan assumes it must be exhausting for his young master to maintain composure around his vicious brothers, while the man himself simply mutters about how tired he is. Then Evan asks why he decided to send that second rescued child to the orphanage. Of course, the young master has his reasons. He knows this boy isn't just another victim, he's an anomaly. The child hails from the Kalyan Kingdom, the central state within the United Realm. In the world of psychedelia, this boy is known as Deus Macalian, the second major boss in the game. After enduring slavery and brutal abuse, he eventually becomes the living embodiment of the sin of sloth, wreaking unspeakable havoc across the land. Many players were shocked by the cruelty of his story. Despite being associated with sloth, Deus was anything but lazy. He was known for relentless determination and an unshakable sense of justice, repaying both kindness and vengeance many times over. That's exactly why our protagonist instructed Evan to treat Deus with the utmost care and gentleness. Even now, he still shivers, remembering the nightmarish difficulty of Deus's battle scenes in the game. Trying to maintain his mysterious, wise, noble persona, he tells Evan the same cryptic line he always does. "It's not the right time yet." Evan nods, unfazed, having grown accustomed to his master's strange riddles. He then asks whether the letter sent to Yusha this time was related to the second child. The young master confirms it, but the reality is far more ridiculous. Inside the letter, he's simply venting to Yusha about how his older brothers keep bullying him. It's both pitiful and hilarious. Still, he claims that he also asked her to look after the second child, who isn't feeling well. Technically, that part is true. Deus really does need time to heal. Meanwhile, at the orphanage, Deus stands alone, trying to hide his injuries and scars. Yusha approaches him, studying him with cold curiosity. She asks if he's broken. Then in a chilling tone, she mentions the Black Goat organization. Deus flinches at the name. Slipping into her obsessive, Yandere-like demeanor, Yusha tells him that even if he's damaged, he's still been chosen. She congratulates him for being acknowledged by the Blue Moon, which she defines as their master, the title she has bestowed upon our protagonist. It's clear she's forming an organization centered around him. She promises Deus that if he remains loyal, he'll be granted his chance at revenge. Hearing this ignites something deep within him. His latent magic, or perhaps the authority of sloth, begins to awaken. Satisfied, Yusha happily decides to write her first reply letter to their master, opening with a light greeting. Back at the manor, the young master is buried in books, still researching clues about the third child. That's when Evan bursts into the room with alarming news. The shock is so sudden that he blurts out a curse about the second young master, quickly correcting himself as he announces that the second son of the Palacio family is dead. Even though our protagonist knew this event was destined to happen, the suddenness of it still rattles him. How did this scum die already, he wonders. The funeral is held immediately, and to everyone's disgust, their father arrives with 2 escorts clinging to his arms. Watching the scene, the young master can only think that even for this twisted family, that's too far. He muses that psychedelia truly is the definition of a dark fantasy. As for Tonio's accidental death, something feels off. In the game, Leo had sobbed hysterically after killing his brother and claiming the title of heir. But here, Leo stands over the coffin, smirking without even pretending to grieve. At least try to act sad, our boy thinks to himself. Still, this isn't his problem. His focus remains on preventing the downfall tied to the 5 great sins. A year passes. Leo inherits Tonio's criminal network and transforms the chaos into a more stable, though still corrupt, domain. The Palacio estate grows quieter. During that time, Yusha and the young master continue exchanging letters, becoming something like pen pals. He figures maintaining that connection will prove useful later. Yusha writes frequent updates about the orphanage and the other children's growth. He's quietly proud, especially after noticing that the sponsorship list keeps getting longer each month. Evan, munching happily on snacks, remarks that it's strange but definitely a good sign. Then he delivers the update our protagonist has been waiting for. They've obtained crucial information from the Intelligence Guild. An ancient text concerning the third child, the next landmine he must deal with. The young master nearly beams with joy. Finally, he can move forward. Everything seems to be going smoothly. Meanwhile, elsewhere in the kingdom, at one of Leo's drug depots, Margit and his henchmen brag about how generous their boss is, boasting that his operations now number in the hundreds. Their laughter dies instantly when chaos erupts. One by one, the men turn on themselves, screaming as if something invisible is forcing their bodies to move against their will. The perpetrators are none other than Yusha and Deus. Deus manipulates deadly threads of magic, effortlessly erasing the entire group. He then turns to Yusha and asks whether slaughtering these people is truly necessary. She replies coldly, asking if he pities them. He answers that he doesn't. After all, these scum used human lives to produce drugs. Yusha explains that this purification is necessary to prepare for their master's rise. With a serene, almost divine smile, she says they can't allow the place to remain filthy when he returns. Deus nods in understanding, or at least he thinks he understands. Together, they etch a glowing sigil into the ground. A surge of mana explodes outward, leaving behind a crescent-shaped mark. As they ascend into the night sky, Yusha declares that they are the Blue Moon. Everything they do is for their master. They are his sword and his shield. 2 years pass since the letter exchange began. Evan has been relentlessly pursuing leads on the remaining sins, and now he collapses onto the grass, utterly drained. A touch of his master's mana restores his strength. Evan announces that they've finally located the 5th child and safely placed them in the orphanage. For the first time in years, our boy feels genuine relief. Though his expression doesn't show it, he's deeply moved. He's done it. He saved all 5 children before their descent into sin. To celebrate, he rewards Evan with cake and tea, praising his dedication, especially in dealing with the sin of greed. The 3rd child had been the hardest to manage, but they succeeded thanks to his insider knowledge from the game. Everything is finally in order. Evan asks why he doesn't seem happier. The young master insists that he's thrilled, but his completely blank face betrays him. We even get a close-up of his smile, which is utterly non-existent. Evan sighs. He's used to it by now. Reflecting on their progress, the young master admits that he never imagined things would go this smoothly. In the game, the 5 bosses became the great sins because of unbearable suffering. Saving them before that transformation had seemed nearly impossible. but somehow he managed it. When he asks about the orphanage's current condition, Evan hands him a letter reporting that everything is running smoothly and that the children seem happier every day. The young master remarks that if that's true, they might not even need a new caretaker. He's surprised that Yusha has handled things so well, though it makes sense considering her deep attachment to the orphanage in the game's story. Reading Yusha's letter, he finds that she's written warmly about each child's progress, especially Deus, reassuring him that everyone is doing fine. For the first time, a faint smile appears on his lips. He's genuinely glad they're growing up well. Evan asks when he plans to finally meet them in person. As always, the young master replies vaguely that the right time will come. In truth, he has no intention of meeting them anytime soon. He's terrified of the power they'll eventually wield. For now, distance feels safest. Still, he knows that if he wants to survive in this grim world, he needs to become stronger. The answer lies in magic, and fortunately this body has the potential for it. While training, Evan mentions a new group rising across the continent called the Blue Moon. The young master feigns ignorance as Evan explains that they've been targeting corrupt nobles and criminal organizations. Outwardly, he praises them, thinking it's a good thing, but deep down he's uneasy. He doesn't remember this group existing in the game. Evan jokingly warns him to be careful since the Blue Moon's next likely targets are the nobility themselves. The young master freezes. He then nervously orders Evan to start sleeping in the room next to his, just in case. Meanwhile, at the orphanage, Yusha convenes a Blue Moon meeting. First to report is Xiao Rang, the Sin of Pride. She calmly states that she eliminated a group of slavers by decapitating them all. She boasts about playing a guessing game with them, promising to spare anyone who could correctly name her eye color. None survived. Next, Rin, the Sin of Greed, gracefully reports that all the bodies were dissolved without leaving a trace. The organization is growing, and its devotion to the Blue Moon is only getting stronger. Then Raiden, the Sin of Mysophobia, reports that he has wrapped things up in the south. He took care of the illegal human testing grounds and turned the Avalon bastards causing trouble into minced meat. Satisfied, Yusha praises them all for a job well done. She speaks confidently about how everything will proceed according to his will, emphasizing that they all exist for the sake of the Great Moon. This secret organization worships the Great Moon, the Blue Moon, who just happens to be our main character. Suddenly, Deus reports a problem. Yusha questions what could possibly be wrong when everything seems perfect under his command. Deus explains that the head of Avalon is the eldest son of the Palacio Count family, the household where their lord resides. While cleaning up the south, he discovered a dangerous written order. It turns out Leo is targeting their master. Naturally, Yusha cannot allow this. She unleashes an intense murderous aura that sends the other children cowering in fear. The letter reveals that Leo plans to slowly poison their master after eliminating their father. This revelation sends Yusha into a furious rage. Fast forward 2 years. Count Palacio has passed away, and just like before, his funeral is held almost immediately. Our boy explains that while the official cause of death is heart failure, it's clear he actually died from an overdose. Meanwhile, during the funeral, Leo receives news that the Blue Moon has struck one of his facilities. Seriously, couldn't they have waited until after the funeral? Leo keeps asking whether everyone was wiped out again. Our protagonist, casually eavesdropping, realizes that his brother is becoming increasingly cautious of the Blue Moon. As the Count's funeral ends without a single tear shed, our boy decides he wants no part in this drama and quietly slips away, just as his brother shoots him a calculating glare. When Evan asks what Alan plans to do next, since that jerk of a brother seems poised to become the new Count, our boy reveals that he's already one step ahead. He's been packing his bags. He tells Evan to do the same. The plan is to run away from the mess. Evan questions whether he truly intends to flee, and our MC clarifies that it's not a complete escape. They're just heading downtown to lie low for a while. When Evan asks if he means the town of Rodmal, he confirms it. He's been eyeing Rodmal for some time now. It's a small town in the southern region of Palacio, making it the perfect hiding place. Plus, Leo's been giving him increasingly unsettling looks. Once they arrive in Rodmal, our MC actually starts enjoying life, whipping up delicious-looking toast while Evan goes along with everything as if this absurd situation is perfectly normal. But 3 days later, their peaceful existence is shattered. Alan is summoned back home for his brother's funeral. He can't believe he's back so soon. According to the game, Leo wasn't supposed to die yet. The cause of death is a stab through the heart, leaving our MC wondering who could have done such a thing. He tries to ask one of the servants for details, but they scream in horror as if they're about to be executed. And it's not just that, all the servants are acting strangely, overly apologetic, treating him like some kind of mafia boss. He can't help but wonder what's wrong with these people. As he's about to leave, Evan catches up to him. When asked whether he found out why the servants are behaving so oddly, Evan claims he did, and playfully wonders whether our MC was the one who made the Avalon drug organization disappear overnight. It turns out Leo was the head of that organization, and now that he's gone, the entire operation seems to have vanished without a trace. We then flash back to the day our main character set off for Rodmal. Inside the carriage, Evan grows curious and asks why he's heading to a small town like Rodmal instead of a bustling city. Our MC explains that a city is simply not an option for him. Rodmal is his ultimate destination, his endgame, and the foundation of all his plans. His mission, he says, is straightforward: save the 5 great sins from their misfortunes and prevent the world from crumbling. And besides, Rodmal isn't part of the original story, it even has a villa. A villa is a separate estate, making it the perfect hideout for a laid-back noble like him, somewhere he can relax and do absolutely nothing. Honestly, he calls it the dream. He then gets serious, insisting that everything he does has a purpose, but after hearing the same explanation one too many times, Evan calls him out. He points out that his master always uses those exact lines whenever he wants to dodge a question. "You can't fool me anymore," Evan says. Our MC is taken aback, realizing Evan has seen right through his little evasions. As their banter continues, Leo, watching the carriage drive away, contemplates whether he should kill his younger brother or not. According to Leo, it doesn't really matter if he lives or dies. He had already planned to poison him anyway. But now that our MC has decided to leave for the border, Leo feels there's no longer any reason to go through with it. And yet, for some inexplicable reason, he still feels the urge to eliminate him. Leo instructs one of his henchmen, Almond, to follow the carriage. Almond hesitates and asks whether that means he's supposed to kill the young master. The question leaves Leo baffled. Almond has never questioned an order before. No matter what he was told, he always carried it out without a word. For him to hesitate now feels strangely out of character. Leo reminds Almond that his job is simply to obey. But before he can finish, Almond lunges forward, stabbing Leo straight through the heart. In shock, Leo demands to know why Almond would betray him. Almond calmly replies that he enjoys playing war. It's soon revealed that Almond is actually a member of the Blue Moon organization, and his real name is hidden. He explains that they follow a creed taught by the Blue Moon. Since the Blue Moon serves as their master's sword, it's only natural for them to act according to his will. However, if anyone dares to threaten the Great Blue Moon, their master, they are permitted to take matters into their own hands. In other words, they are allowed to eliminate the threat. Hidden reveals that he had been waiting for Leo to give the order to kill their lord, and he can't believe it took 2 whole years for that moment to arrive. Leo desperately argues that his remaining subordinates won't let Hidden live, but Hidden counters calmly. With Leo's death, the entire Avalon organization will be wiped off the continent forever. Looking down at Leo's lifeless body, Hidden remarks how unfortunate it all is. If Leo hadn't tried to kill their great master, he might have lived for a few more months, perhaps even years. Meanwhile, in the present, our MC is living his dream life in the small town of Rodmal. He wakes whenever he wants, enjoys delicious meals with Evan, and lives the carefree life of a true noble. But fate has other plans. His peaceful routine shatters when he receives a letter requesting that he step up as the next head of the family. Just like that, his carefree life ends, only 4 days after it began, forcing him to return to the Palacio estate. Something immediately feels off. The maids and staff behave strangely around him, their attitudes stiff and overly respectful. He can't help but wonder what's behind their odd behavior. Then Evan teasingly asks him when he became the shadow leader of the family. He's completely baffled. It dawns on him that all of this stems from the bizarre circumstances surrounding his brother's death, which have now placed him in this awkward position. In his usual dramatic fashion, he breaks down, sobbing as he begs Evan to explain why he's suddenly being treated like the villain of this story. Evan points out that since he stands to gain the most from Leo's death, it's only natural for people to suspect him. After all, the moment he left the estate, Leo was killed, and our MC conveniently had the perfect alibi to step into the role of the next count. Realizing that his attempt to avoid this mess has backfired spectacularly, frustration washes over him. Evan tries to cheer him up, explaining that with the Avalon drug organization gone and his brother dead, there's nothing left to worry about. Jokingly, Evan adds that, in short, his master is now the new shadow leader of the county, the man who supposedly orchestrated the assassination of a sword master. Despite Leo's scummy reputation, he was still widely regarded as a sword master. Our MC begins to wonder where to even start. He can't think of any organization capable of eliminating such a powerful underworld figure so quickly. He asks Evan about the group rumored to be hunting other organizations. Evan hesitates, then asks if he means the Blue Moon. Our boy wonders whether the Blue Moon could be responsible for his brother's death and the downfall of Avalon. But Evan quickly clears things up. According to the Intelligence Guild, the Blue Moon is not to blame. Instead of leaving behind bodies, the Blue Moon is known for marking the moon itself. That's simply how it operates. However, rumors say that every member of Avalon met their end with a sword through the heart. Evan can't help but tease our MC, joking that the road to hell has officially been opened. Putting the joke aside, our MC reflects on his game knowledge. There was never an organization called the Blue Moon in Psychedelia. That means they shouldn't be responsible for this incident. But if it isn't them, then who could it be? As he struggles to piece everything together, the scene shifts to the orphanage, where Yusha is holding a meeting with the other great sins. She asks whether everything went smoothly. Rin, the sin of greed, confirms that she left no traces behind. Xiao Rang, the sin of pride, adds that there was no one left alive on her end, only corpses. Deus chimes in, boasting that he personally took out all 486 soldiers of Avalon. His magic is terrifying yet elegant, like a beautiful butterfly tangled in a spider's web. Then Raiden, the sin of mysophobia, confirms that he also cut down all the remaining enemies. Yusha praises them for their work, though her presence is deeply intimidating. There are whispers that in the novel she's actually over 1,000 years old, but no one truly knows. That's how Avalon, the most notorious drug organization in the world, responsible for bringing ruin to the Asteria Kingdom, was wiped out in just 5 days. Suddenly, Raiden speaks up, saying he doesn't believe the cleanup was flawless. When Yusha asks what he means, Raiden explains that he stumbled upon intriguing documents tied to nobles associated with Avalon, particularly the Altia dukedom, which appears to have deep connections. Hearing this, Yusha's magic flares violently. She tells the others that they already know what she's about to say. It's time to wipe them out. Raiden promises to handle it quietly. Moving on, Yusha asks whether the Information Guild is clean and if it has any ties to Avalon. Rin confirms that the matter is being handled separately from the Blue Moon issue. Deus comments that all guilds behave the same way, calling them a hell-forged sword crafted by a swordmaster. Hearing this, Ria asks whether she should keep tabs on our MCS movements. Yusha agrees, emphasizing that this entire situation must not reach that person's ears. She reminds them that she has already stressed this point multiple times. When she says that person, she is, of course, referring to our MC. Deus points out that since that person's family targeted them first, the order to eliminate them wasn't sanctioned by him. At this, Yusha begins to panic. She insists that all their actions must be driven by a direct order from their master. They are swords, and a sword should never think for itself. She declares that from this moment onward, all members of the Blue Moon are to act only on orders, and that this decree must be taken seriously. The other sins grow uneasy as Yusha adds that they must never disappoint that person, no matter what. Inwardly, Deus admits that he doesn't fully understand any of this. For someone as powerful as Yusha to feel such anxiety just from the possibility of being noticed seems excessive. Still, he tells her that he understands. The meeting concludes with all of them chanting that everything they do is for the Great Moon. Meanwhile, back with our MC, he finds himself buried under paperwork as the new Count of Palacio. He explains that after his brother's funeral, he endured an entire month of endless duties and the workload has completely overwhelmed him. He starts shedding tears, lamenting that all he wants is to loaf around and do nothing. This fool even claims that's what it truly means to be a noble. Still, he can't help but think that while he had made plenty of enemies, Leo's death was supposed to happen 6 years later. But with the strange circumstances surrounding both his brothers' deaths, everything shifted. Now all the family responsibilities have landed squarely on him as the sole heir. Just then, several ministers from the county enter the room, bringing even more paperwork. He closes his eyes, wondering why everyone in the county suddenly seems to be working so hard. Back when his father was still Count, they would slack off and treat work like a rainy school day. With a tired wave of his hand, he signals them to place the documents on his desk. But in the minister's eyes, he's radiating a deathly aura. They worry they may have angered him somehow, with some silently vowing to work even harder to avoid punishment. To them, he's a secret mastermind who eliminates anyone who displeases him. In reality, having once been a corporate workhorse himself, he's barely holding up under the pressure. He wonders if it might be possible to get the ministers to do all the work for him instead. Later that night, Evan is shocked to learn that our boy has reached the second tier of magic after just 2 years of self-study in poisoncraft. The little rascal is casually casting spells all over the house. Normally, it takes 4 to 5 years of formal instruction and natural talent to reach the second tier. Our protagonist admits that his magical talent is fairly decent. Deep down, though, he knows he's been practicing relentlessly for self-defense. Something doesn't feel right. To wield magic effectively for protection, one must have perfect control over their mana, and that's exactly what he's managing right now. Still, he can't help but wonder what good his magic is if it's only half-baked. He insists that he's tried every type of magic this fantasy world offers, and at first it was exhilarating. He once believed that mastering magic would mean he'd have nothing left to fear. But now, it feels less like mastery and more like desperation, scrambling to learn magic just to save his own skin. That's when the harsh reality finally hits him. His mana capacity is alarmingly small. Without mana, there is no magic, and that spells trouble, possibly even death. As he sinks into despair, we learn that innate mana capacity is similar to an athlete's natural weight class. Some people are born with extraordinary potential, while others are limited from the start. Unfortunately, our main character belongs to the latter. He's stuck with a minuscule mana pool, and no amount of training can change that. Still, he clings to a small glimmer of hope. If all else fails, there is a way to fix it. Just then, Evan interrupts his thoughts, announcing that his invitation to the ball has finally arrived. Our protagonist is momentarily confused, unsure what Evan is talking about. A few days later, the scene shifts to the grand ball. Our main character makes his entrance dressed in truly majestic attire. The fit is impeccable, but being the introverted type, he claims he's already exhausted even though he's just arrived. This party, for what it really is a typical aristocratic gathering in the southern region of the Asteria Kingdom. In other words, a noble meet and greet. And since our MC is about to be sworn in as a count, attendance isn't optional. He switches into serious mode, seeing this as a golden opportunity to build connections with the nobility, something essential if he wants to live a peaceful life. But it doesn't take long for reality to crush that hope. Instead of greeting him, nobles flee in sheer terror. He even tries waving at them. They literally run away. Evan attempts to cheer him up, telling him not to feel discouraged. Our MC insists he's not upset, though his expression clearly betrays him. He claims he expected this reaction and resolves to try harder as he heads off on his own. In truth, he completely misunderstands what's happening. He assumes the other nobles are looking down on him for being a low-ranking noble without strong backing, and he's not entirely wrong. The Palacio household is infamous, largely due to his 2 older brothers. Picking up a wine glass, he reassures himself that he didn't come to the ball without a plan. He's determined to put his secretly practiced social skills to use. He begins commenting on the wine's unique aroma, hoping to spark a conversation. However, due to a mysterious condition that makes it difficult for him to show emotion, his expression comes off as disturbingly cold. When he attempts to smile, it only makes things worse. He politely tells a lady that he'd love to have a few bottles at home, fully believing his smile looks perfect. In her eyes, however, he resembles a demon king. Terrified, she bolts, shouting that she'll tell her father to prepare them immediately. To the surrounding nobles, it looks like our protagonist just extorted a poor woman into handing over a limited edition regional wine. What a disaster. Evan tries to comfort him, while our MC insists the lady must have simply been shy. Later, he's sulking in a corner as Evan happily munches on food, teasing him about how his pile of gifts keeps growing. It turns out the wine incident wasn't a one-time thing. Every time he speaks to someone, they assume he's blackmailing them, handing over items like piña citrus tea and other valuables. He can't shake the feeling that the Palacio name has become far more infamous than he ever imagined. With rumors circulating that he murdered both of his brothers, he's effectively become a symbol of fear. Feeling drained, he tells Evan that he needs some fresh air. As he steps outside, a red-haired beauty briefly catches his eye. Standing alone, he wonders where everything went so wrong. Suddenly, a soft voice calls out from behind, asking if he has a moment. He turns around but sees no one. Looking down, he spots a small, adorable girl introducing herself as Loria, the third daughter of Duke Altia. The name Altia immediately rings a bell. In Psychedelia, the Altia family was one of the three major shadow players known as the Northern Troublemakers. The realization stings. He had hoped that someone normal had finally spoken to him. What troubles him more is that he can't recall Loria at all from the game. If she never appeared, then that can only mean one thing. She must have already been dead. Loria gets straight to the point, asking him to lend her his strength for protection. She explains that she's facing an imminent assassination attempt. She's in serious trouble and needs his help. But as he looks at her, hesitation fills his eyes. Loria has been living under the protection of her father's mistress. Now that her father's health is rapidly declining, she fears her older sisters will try to eliminate her. The situation feels painfully familiar. It mirrors his own past with his brothers. As he stares at her, the truth settles in. Loria didn't appear in the game because she never survived long enough to matter. With pleading eyes, she begs for his help, insisting that with his abilities, he could truly make a difference. But our protagonist refuses. She quickly adds that she isn't asking for free help. If he saves her, she promises to give him half of the Altia family's fortune. Even so, he walks away. He feels sympathy for her, but deep down he knows he can barely control his own magic. Giving her hope would be cruel. Despite wanting to help, he knows he isn't the all-powerful figure everyone believes him to be. As he heads back into the party room, he can't shake the image of Loria's sad expression. Guilt settles heavily in his chest. Before stepping inside, he quietly wishes her luck. Meanwhile, Deus and Rin, watching from a distance, begin discussing their next move. One of the Altia family members has approached their master, and Deus wonders whether he should report this to the Red Moon, Yusha's code name. Rin reassures him that everything is under control. According to their intelligence, Loria is the only Altia family member not involved with Avalon. That means she's effectively safe, since Raiden, the sin of Mysophobia, has already been dispatched to deal with the rest of her family. The fate of the Altia household has already been decided. They will be wiped out, all under the Red Moon's orders. Rin adds that their current priority is ensuring their master remains unaware of anything connected to Avalon. Meanwhile, our completely clueless protagonist wonders why everyone continues to avoid him. He starts questioning whether he's surrounded by some kind of invisible barrier. Just then, the red-haired woman from earlier approaches him. For the first time that night, he genuinely feels happy, well, inwardly at least. He can't believe someone actually acknowledged him. Maybe this time he thinks he'll finally manage to socialize. But as he turns to face her, he immediately realizes she's no ordinary noble. She's another shadow player. Looking at her face, he suddenly recalls seeing her in the game. And it hits him no normal person would ever approach him first unless they were trouble. He greets her politely, calling her Lady Zenonia. She freezes, surprised. How does he know her name? Our protagonist explains that she's quite famous. In the Asteria Kingdom, there are three major shadow player families, the Altia in the north, the Palacio in the east, and the Zenonia in the west. The woman before him is none other than Zenonia Kalia, the eldest daughter of Count Zenonia. She asks if she's truly that well-known. He responds honestly. While the Palacio family runs gangs openly, the Zenonia family operates more like a sophisticated criminal syndicate. Just thinking about it sends a chill down his spine. All he wants is a peaceful, noble life. And for that dream to survive, he knows he must avoid getting entangled with this stunning, dangerous woman. With a respectful bow, he compliments her beauty almost like a farewell, but she stops him. She says she wants to speak with him about something. He replies politely that he'd love to, but there are too many eyes on them right now. Deep down, he desperately hopes she'll just leave him alone. Smiling, she tells him he's exactly as the rumors describe. She adds that she looks forward to seeing him again. And just like that, she walks away, leaving him completely dumbfounded. He wonders what that statement was supposed to mean. It sounds like some kind of code, but he shakes the thought away. Nearby, Rin and Deus watch everything unfold. They're satisfied that their efforts to keep their master in the dark are going smoothly, but Deus suddenly notices something troubling. Outside the window, he spots someone who's been tailing their master for quite some time. Without hesitation, the two of them rush out to deal with the threat. The next day, our protagonist and Evan find themselves deep in a forest. Evan asks if he's really sure this is the canyon they're looking for. It's midday, the sun is shining, but the canyon ahead is unnaturally dark. Our boy barely listens, he's ecstatic. He's finally found his true objective. As they step inside, he jokes that if this place turns out to be empty like the others, he might actually cry. But when he sees the symbols carved into the walls, he knows immediately. This is the real thing. He explains that in the game, finding this place was easy. In truth, the only reason he traveled all the way south under the pretense of attending the ball was to locate this very labyrinth, the Labyrinth of Whispers. If one can solve all the riddles across its 8 rooms, they'll be rewarded with a powerful artifact. Exactly what he needs. He confidently claims he has memorized every route and puzzle the labyrinth contains. Soon they stand before a massive door. Staring at it, he admits that seeing the labyrinth's entrance in person is breathtaking. It feels far more real than it ever did in the game. In the game, he cleared this labyrinth countless times. Evan, confused, asks how he even knew a place like this existed. Without thinking, our protagonist replies that he's been here often. Evan stares at him, completely lost. Realizing he slipped up, our boy quickly laughs it off, saying he was just joking, and urges them to head inside. Inside, they're immediately confronted by monsters and massive golem-like hands that could crush them like twigs. Evan wonders if these creatures are tied to the riddles, and whether getting an answer wrong would mean instant death. Our protagonist, however, remains completely calm as he begins solving the riddle. Watching him, Evan can't understand how he stays so composed in a situation like this. They've been together for 4 years now, yet Evan still doesn't understand him. Saving orphans, repaying random debts, freeing slaves. Delivering messages that seem pointless at the time. In Evan's eyes, his master is a complete weirdo, and yet every strange decision somehow leads to a good outcome. As they solve the final riddle and step deeper inside, our protagonist can't shake the gruesome imagery burned into his memory from the game. He feels nauseous, but then they enter a lavish chamber overflowing with gold and treasure. His gaze immediately locks onto a hand statue adorned with multiple rings. That's it. He declares that their target is the black ring and insists they grab it and leave immediately. Meanwhile, Evan, busy stuffing his pockets with gold, asks why our protagonist is so fixated on the black ring, which looks like the least valuable item in the room. Our hero explains that taking anything else could lead to serious trouble later on. Deep down, he knows the truth. He's finally obtained the ring that holds the oath of restraint. As they begin heading back, our MC feels satisfied, thinking that acquiring the ring was effortless thanks to his game knowledge. But suddenly, Evan senses something wrong. He points out that the piles of rocks they passed on the way in are actually golems, and they're starting to move. Evan immediately shifts into battle mode, tension flooding his body. To him, these golems are complete unknowns, making this a worst-case scenario. If it comes down to it, he's prepared to sacrifice himself just to get his young master out safely. But our protagonist steps forward and tells Evan to stand down. He says he'll handle the golems himself. As the golems prepare to attack, Evan urgently tells him to find an escape route first. He warns that even with second-tier magic, these monsters are far too dangerous. Our MC, however, stands tall. Calmly, he invokes the Oath of Restraint, activating the black ring. In an instant, time seems to slow to a crawl. He finds himself pulled into a different dimension. A voice echoes through the void, introducing itself as a fragment inheriting the great will of Yahello. It instructs him to declare the 2 restraints he wishes to impose upon himself. The situation is overwhelming. In the game, this moment appeared as a simple choice window. But here, faced with a colossal presence and a massive face looming in a dark cosmic expanse, the pressure is immense. The Oath of Restraint is an absorption-type artifact. It allows the user to impose limitations upon themselves in exchange for power. Still, the sheer force of the voice makes our MC tremble. The voice demands his first restraint. Forming a hand sign, he declares that he will always perform the hand signs of Babylonia when casting magic. The voice then asks what he seeks in return. Our boy answers that he wants the ability to bend the laws of the world just a little more. For the second restraint, he declares that he will strictly chant the words of Babylonia whenever he uses magic. When the voice asks what he desires in exchange, he boldly requests even greater power to defy the laws of the world. The entity pauses. For a moment, our protagonist panics, worried that he's made a mistake. To be safe, he even mimics the exact skill icon he remembers from the game. By choosing both the hand signs and incantation restraints, he believes he's achieved the highest possible magic amplification. After all, he's memorized every combination through countless playthroughs. Finally, the voice speaks again. It confirms that his restraints have been accepted. The entity thanks him, the human who remembers all the gestures and mysteries of the forgotten god. Though confused by its words, our protagonist notices the black ring dissolving into his body. The artifact has been fully absorbed. Before fading away, the entity tells him that it will always be watching over him as the one who will inherit its will, whatever that means. Suddenly, time begins to flow again. The golems lunge toward him. Evan reaches out, shouting his name, but our hero remains unfazed. He begins casting his magic. He even chuckles to himself, thinking about how impressive this spell looked in the game compared to how pitifully small it is now due to his limited mana. Gathering the magic in his hand, he reflects that no matter how hard he trains, this is likely his limit. Still, it's time to test his new restraints. As he casts, his magic looks strangely majestic. Maybe it's the pose. He chants the first word, refraction. The magic begins to form. Then comes repulsion, causing the spell to swell dramatically, transforming into a brilliant blue sphere of electric energy. The magic ball grows massive. With precise hand signs, he adds a directional chant, and then he releases it. The The resulting lightning obliterates every golem in sight, reducing them to dust. Evan is left speechless. He can hardly believe what he's just witnessed. He asks if his master has been hiding his true power all along, but our MC shakes his head. Evan admits that in all his 15 years as a mercenary, he's never seen anything like that. He asks if our protagonist is absolutely sure that was only second-tier magic. Our boy confirms it, though inwardly he's just as confused. This wasn't how it worked in the game. In Psychedelia's turn-based combat system, magic could be enhanced each turn through hand signs and incantations. This time he stacked every available enhancement, 4 incantations and hand signs, effectively simulating 5 turns of magic amplification. In simple terms, he used the settings for a large-scale lightning spell. But because of his oath of restraint, every spell now required full hand signs and incantations, causing the magic to be amplified repeatedly. Even so, the result exceeded his expectations. The sheer power catches him completely off guard. Meanwhile, Evan is just relieved they survived. Collapsing onto the ground, he remarks that watching that battle was more exhausting than actually fighting. Then he asks who on earth would create such a terrible canyon. After a moment, our protagonist remembers something. The Labyrinth of Whispers had another name in the game. The layout and strategy guide were uploaded to the community website where it was called the Maze of Palion. He tells Evan that a man named Palion created it, but Evan is far too tired to even process that information. Our protagonist grabs Evan, telling him they need to head back home immediately. He has something he wants to do once they return. This sudden burst of motivation leaves Evan confused, wondering why his usually lazy master is acting so driven today. Our MC explains that every time he used a hand sign that matched the attribute of the spell he was casting, its power increased. Choosing the correct incantation further enhanced the spell's properties, exactly how the game mechanics were designed to work. The difference is that in the game, only the numbers changed while the visuals stayed the same. In this world, however, the spell itself actually changes shape with every incantation. That realization makes him pause. He begins to wonder whether this phenomenon applies only to him, especially since he's unusually skilled at controlling mana. He decides he'll need to test it further once his mana recovers. For now, though, he's just relieved that everything ended safely. As they prepare to leave on horseback, we see Rin, who has been quietly following our protagonist, observing the scene from afar. She heads toward the canyon, and upon arriving, she notices the runes carved into the walls. To her surprise, she can read them. Rin explains that these are glyphs of the Elenif Empire, records that tell the story of the era of the forgotten outer gods. Her eyes catch a smaller glyph hidden in a corner. As she translates it, she reads, "For my friend who shall be left alone from the coward Palion." Examining the inscriptions more closely, a smile slowly spreads across her face. She recalls that the one who halted the invasion of the black creatures, standing victorious against the Al-Akulaka that devoured the hearts of the people, was none other than the brilliant emperor known as Palion the Great. Rin knows all of this because she inherited this knowledge at birth, passed down through the ancient library she received. She briefly remembers our protagonist mentioning that Palion was the one who built the canyon. As usual, she completely misinterprets the situation. She becomes convinced that our MC must be a close associate or even a friend of Palion himself. After all, someone followed by the bloody Queen Yusha could only be a figure of legend. Having someone like Yusha as a subordinate is the kind of thing that only appears in history books. Her belief only deepens when she realizes that the phrase our protagonist used while casting magic doesn't exist anywhere in the ancient library. To her, that can only mean one thing: he is truly extraordinary. Blushing slightly, Rin admits to herself that Yusha was right all along. She feels embarrassed for having doubted things and simply following orders without question. And just like that, our protagonist unknowingly gains yet another dangerously devoted admirer. Which is unsettling considering they're all still children. Just then, Rin notices Deus approaching and immediately asks whether he managed to get any information from the fool who had been tailing their master. Deus replies that the idiot is dead and that he didn't even kill him. The man's head simply twisted in midair. Rin insists that this needs to be reported to Yusha for proper handling. With that decided, the two of them depart. Meanwhile, in Zenonia County, Lady Kalia sits calmly, sipping her tea as she reflects on the rumors surrounding our protagonist. She notes his chillingly emotionless expression and those abyss-like eyes. What unsettles her most is that he called her famous. Count Zenonia is powerful and well-known, yes, but for someone uninvolved in high society to recognize her specifically is deeply troubling. In truth, Kalia is the real mastermind. She uses black magic to control her father, turning him into a puppet and making herself the true head of the Zenonia family. No one is supposed to know that, so when our protagonist called her famous, she couldn't help but wonder whether he knows her secret. That thought terrifies her. She recalls how he mentioned there were too many eyes on them, a comment she now interprets as him having discovered the person she sent to follow him. Suddenly, one of her servants contacts her, saying there's a problem. When she asks what it is, the servant insists it's better for her to see it herself. Upon entering her room, Kalia finds the body of the man she sent to tail our protagonist. He's dead. The servant explains that since the seal on the body never activated, it means the man didn't reveal any secrets. But Kalia immediately points out something far more disturbing. Whoever killed him deliberately brought the body here. Furious and unsettled, she starts questioning how our protagonist could have possibly known she was the one behind the surveillance. Once again, our MC is misunderstood in the worst possible way. At the grand halls of the Altia estate, the scene shifts to Loria as she walks through the silent corridors. Her face is heavy with disappointment and exhaustion. Her thoughts spiral with regret and realization. As expected, she knew he was not someone to underestimate. A distinguished figure of the underworld with cold eyes much like her father's, someone she must never make an enemy of. He had been her last lifeline, but she also understood that he would never accept a deal that brought him nothing but loss. Her siblings had stripped her of everything. The eldest son, Timalian, the eldest daughter, Marian, the second son, Keeg. The second daughter, Piran, she had survived only through her father's love and protection, but now even that felt fragile. As she walks deeper into the estate, lost in despair, she whispers that she no longer knows what to do. At that moment, the maids rush toward her in panic, their voices trembling as they call out her name. Their faces are pale with fear. They tell her that Lady Piran and Keeg have taken their own lives. Shock spreads across Loria's face. Her body freezes in disbelief as her thoughts race. Those people would rather stab their own family, and yet they chose to take their own lives. None of it makes sense. Fear grips her heart as she asks about Timalian and Marian. Soon after, she's shown a horrifying sight. Timalian and Marian lie lifeless on the floor, their swords buried in each other's chests. Loria's body trembles as terror consumes her. Her mind screams in confusion, unable to understand why or how such a tragedy could have occurred. Meanwhile, outside the Altia estate, Raiden is seen leaving swiftly. A faint smirk curls across his lips as he mutters to himself. Successfully eliminated. Loria's mind flashes back to Alan's earlier words, the vague warning that good things would happen soon. An icy dread runs through her veins, a realization strikes her. The true mastermind of the ducal household, the one who hid his claws and waited patiently for the right moment, has finally made his move. This is what he meant. Overnight, she's become the sole successor of the Altia family. A bitter laugh escapes her lips as she wonders what kind of monstrous devil she's made a pact with. But there is no turning back now. Those who betrayed him have already met terrible ends. There are too many precedents to deny it. She steels herself, resolving to walk the path she has chosen, no matter how dark it becomes. A sudden determination ignites in her eyes. 2 months later, a grand gift arrives from the Altia estate addressed to Alan. Evan's eyes widen in shock when he sees it. A bottle of Cernant's wine, a legendary luxury worth thousands of gold per bottle. He can hardly believe it, remarking that he never expected to see something so rare. When Alan reads the accompanying letter, he realizes the gift wasn't sent by Duke Altia himself. It was sent by Loria Altia. The youngest daughter prepared it personally. Alan is confused. Why would she send this to him? The thought weighs heavily on his conscience, reminding him that he failed to help her when she needed him most. He turns to the servant and asks if the gift is truly meant for him. The servant confirms it and adds that the Duke herself prepared it and ordered the delivery personally. That single phrase makes Alan pause. The Duke herself. Realization hits him. Loria has become the Duke. The scene shifts to Loria in her office, buried in documents. When she finally finishes her work, she leans back and stretches, quietly remarking how quickly 2 months have passed. After her father's death from illness, she officially became Duke following the succession ceremony. She recalls how she wasn't even allowed to enter this office before. Her siblings' deaths were sudden, yet no suspicion ever fell on her. She had a perfect alibi. She was attending the ball at the time. Back then, her secret organization had already been destroyed by her siblings, leaving her completely powerless upon returning to the mansion. Only later did she understand just how deeply he had calculated everything. On the surface, he rejected her plea with indifference. Behind the scenes, he cleaned everything up perfectly. She wonders how far into the future he planned all of this. She never informed him about her father's funeral, not wanting to trouble him, and yet he still helped her. That means he has a reason. He needs Altia for something in his grand design. Even after consolidating all subordinate organizations under the Altia banner, she knows it still doesn't compare to the immense power hidden behind his calm expression. That can only mean one thing: he wants something from her. Palacio, the distinguished figure of the underworld who rose through sheer business acumen. If there is one thing she has that he lacks, it is the ability to manipulate the political stage from the shadows. For now, he needs the Altia name. Accepting this, she resolves to play her role. Believing that the distinguished one will contact her soon, she hopes he understands the meaning behind her gift of gratitude. The scene shifts again. Alan stands in his quarters as Loria's servant bows deeply, declaring that he will now follow Alan's lead. Alan remains silent, lost in thought. The fact that Loria, who once stood on the brink of death, is now a duke doesn't sit right with him. Evan notices his troubled expression and silently wonders what's bothering him this time. A few months pass. The narration notes that this is 5 years before the original story begins. Evan enters excitedly, calling out to Alan as young master, before quickly correcting himself and addressing him as count. Alan calmly responds that the succession ceremony hasn't happened yet, but since a year has already passed, he supposes it's fine. Despite his words, he lets out a quiet sigh. He never planned to become count. Still, having adjusted to the role, he decides to make full use of his noble status. If he has it, he might as well use it. Evan hands him a letter saying it arrived from Yusha. Alan hums thoughtfully and asks whether there's been any progress regarding the assassins who killed Leo. They walk into the grand library and take their seats. Evan reports that nothing has surfaced yet. The Information Guild is still investigating and more time is needed. After a brief pause, Evan asks what Alan's next goal is. Assuming revenge is no longer on the table, the two sit quietly among the towering shelves. Alan reflects deeply. He realizes that every deviation from the original game must be a butterfly effect caused by his own actions. Accepting this, he resolves to simply prepare for whatever unexpected events may come. Watching him, Evan remarks that he's starting to sound like a real count. Alan brushes it off casually, but his attention soon drifts back to the letter in his hand. He wonders what Yusha has written this time. Slowly, Alan opens the letter and begins to read. Yusha's letter was warm and familiar. She asked whether he had been well and wrote that, as always, everyone was doing fine. Each of them had found something they enjoyed. Deus's puppet shows had reached a professional level. Xiaoring loved to play and learn alongside her friends. Rin spent her days quietly reading and crafting, while Raiden had developed a new hobby, tending his garden. As Alan read the letter, a gentle smile spread across his face. The routine of exchanging letters each month had become something precious to him. Every time he received news from them, it warmed his heart a little more. Though he had never seen their faces, knowing that they were growing up well filled him with a deep sense of contentment. He couldn't help but keep smiling. Then a realization struck him. The 5 of them, the children, were already grown. Evan noticed the change in his expression and spoke up, explaining that they were ready to step out into society. Some had even left the orphanage earlier than expected. The ones Alan had once ordered to save had now reached that stage of life. Alan quietly acknowledged it. They were no longer fragile children, they had grown. It was time to let them go. Evan looked surprised, reminding him that he had placed them all together because they had been wounded. But Alan calmly replied that there was no longer a reason to keep them there. The time had come. He believed he had done enough to ensure they would never awaken as the deadly sins they were meant to become. Because of that, they would be fine now. Evan agreed. Since they were all healthy, it was time to move forward. Alan's thoughts drifted back to his knowledge of the original game. Each boss had been associated with a specific path. Yusha possessed the talent of faith, Deus had the talent of the sword, Rin had the talent of study. Xiaoring had the talent of a fighter. Raiden carried the talent of an apostle. If they pursued the right paths, they would undoubtedly thrive. Satisfied, Alan quietly declared it a perfect plan. Feeling resolved, he decided to prepare gifts for each of them. He had intended to do so eventually and now felt like the right time. As evening fell, his work for the day finally came to an end. Evan stretched and said he would step out for a bit, promising to return soon. Alan waved him off. He wondered if one day he might receive something in return from them after they became successful and influential. He hoped his letters would help guide them as they stepped confidently into the world. Elsewhere, Yusha received Alan's new letter. Gathering everyone together, she announced that new orders had arrived. This time, however, each of them had received a letter individually. The room fell silent as they read, expressions focused. Xiaoring could barely contain her excitement, her eyes sparkling as she unfolded her letter. It marked the beginning of a new chapter. Yusha finished reading her own letter and announced again that new orders had arrived. She explained that this time, Alan had deliberately delivered them separately. Before anything else, she suggested they reread the previous letter as well. Since the new instructions required careful attention, she felt it was necessary. Xiaoring spoke up innocently, noting that until now, only Yusha had been allowed to read Alan's letters. Yusha explained that because Alan had given each of them a personal order, it meant he had decided it was finally time for everyone to see the contents themselves. As they read, Xiaoring and the others reacted like curious kittens. Xiaoring clumsily read aloud the opening line. "How have you been lately? It seems you have many talented friends. If you need anything, let me know." Rin commented that it sounded like ordinary small talk, but Yusha smiled. She understood Alan had deliberately kept the opening simple. After the greeting, this was the first true order he had ever issued. He had defined targets, assigned missions, and instructed them to report the results afterward. It was also the moment he formally entrusted Blue Moon to her. He had personally chosen each of them. The Sins grew excited at the thought of finally meeting him one day. Deus nodded, saying it made sense. Delivering orders this way reduced the risk of information leaks. Yusha recalled her very first order and smiled, remembering how firmly she had been instructed to understand the mission clearly and execute it without fail. Deus then wondered aloud whether it might be better to visit Alan directly or use magical communication instead. Raiden agreed that letters seemed unusual if secrecy was the concern. Yusha's expression hardened. She reminded them that their duty was not to question, but to follow Alan's orders. Gripping the letter tightly, she silenced the discussion. Deus sighed at her unwavering resolve, then agreed that they should read their assignments properly. One by one, they shared their destinations. Deus was ordered to head to Caliburn, the Nation of Knights. Xiaoring scoffed, calling it a desert colony she disliked. Raiden reported that he was assigned to Raxus, the entertainment city. Rin said she was ordered to go to Larthania, the maze city. For Yusha, she will be heading to the Holy Kingdom of Rosaria. Finally, Deus spoke. Alan had instructed him to become a knight. Even to him, the order felt strange. Xiaoring added that Alan had reassured them not to worry, as their patronage would continue. Rin mentioned that the letters also revealed the locations of their gifts. Raiden calmly remarked that everything would make sense once they reached their destinations. Before dismissing them, Yusha gathered everyone and repeated Alan's final rule. They must never mention the name Blue Moon. Everyone agreed. The next day, all the members assembled and departed, each heading out to carry out Alan's orders. 3 months later, inside his office, Alan sighs. As expected, there's been no noticeable change in his magical abilities. He continues reading advanced magical texts, trying to push his limits, muttering to himself that he'll have to experiment on his own, ridiculous as it feels. Suddenly, he looks up at his knight. "Evan, what are you doing?" Then something comes back to him. Alan asks about the investigation into Leo's assassination. Evan replies that the Information Guild still hasn't uncovered anything. Alan looks surprised for a moment and asks if there's anything else to report. Under his breath, he mutters that the butterfly effect caused by saving the 5 deadly sins has already spiraled out of control. Even Loria, someone who was never supposed to appear in the original storyline, has become the Duke of Altia. The thought unsettles him. She's expanding her power and influence at a frightening pace within the underworld. Letting out a tired chuckle, Alan tells Evan to stop the investigation entirely. It's pointless work, and he already has more than enough responsibilities weighing on him. Evan looks at him in surprise. Alan explains that the entire situation is clearly the result of his own ignorance. In a world like this, almost nothing escapes the Information Guild's network, and even that fact makes him uneasy. If he digs into things he's not meant to touch, the consequences could be far worse than the truth itself. He mutters that if an unexpected complication leads straight to death, then the investigation itself has no meaning. In the end, organizations like that won't target him as long as he doesn't interfere with their affairs. He reassures both himself and Evan that there's no reason for any secret group to pursue him unless he approaches them first. That's why continuing the investigation into Leo's death serves no purpose. Evan nods and agrees to inform the guild to stop. Then he suddenly remembers something. Oh right. There's one more piece of news. Apparently Deus has recently been appointed as a knight in Caliburn. Alan looks up surprised. Really, that's good for him. 3 months later, Evan walks forward and called out Alan. "Count, there's something else." He explains that Deus has formed an entire knight order. Alan straightens. A knight order? Then he must be at expert level or higher. Could he already be approaching sword master? Evan confirms that Deus has indeed reached the level of sword expert. Alan thinks quietly. It hasn't been long since Deus was first appointed. Across the continent, students are already whispering about it, claiming the world will witness a 5th Master Knight within 10 years. Alan raises an eyebrow. "Deus, the future Master Knight? You mean the one they call the Sword of Caliburn?" Evan chuckles. "Yes, he's absurdly talented. Caliburn is in complete uproar because of him. He keeps gaining recognition and followers through sheer swordsmanship." Alan silently admires his progress. 6 months later, almost a full year has passed since the 5 deadly sins left the orphanage. Alan has slowly grown accustomed to his role as Count. Then Evan rushes in again. "Count, this just came in." Alan asks what it is. Evan answers, "Deus has officially become the Sword of Caliburn." Alan freezes. That can only mean one thing. He calmly states that only a sword master can become a master knight. He explains that in Psychedelia, a sword master is a superhuman, someone who has surpassed the aura blade and unlocked a unique ability known as derivation. Turning to Evan, he asks if he's truly saying that Deus has reached sword master level. Evan quickly clarifies, "Not yet. Deus hasn't created his derivation, but Caliburn granted him the title of master knight anyway." Not only did he defeat the 4th sword in a duel, but Caliburn also lost one of their master knights to the northern barbarians. Alan reflects briefly. The two sides have been at war for over a decade. Evan continues, explaining that learning mana control alone usually takes 5 years. Creating a derivation typically requires decades. The first sword, Reinhardt, became the youngest master knight in history at age 32. He had wielded a sword since he was 5, and even then it took over 20 years to reach that level. And yet now, a child who once knew nothing about swords is standing at the threshold of mastery. Alan's eyes widen. So if he's only missing his derivation, does that mean he's already surpassed Reinhardt? A small smile forms on his face. He might become a sword master sooner than I expected. Evan quietly notes his reaction. Alan looks down at the letter and murmurs that perhaps there's nothing more he can do. But Evan immediately insists he shouldn't blame himself. Alan shakes his head and explains that he only ever receives letters from Yusha. Even after she left for the Holy Kingdom, she continued writing regularly. Every letter carried updates about the 5 deadly sins she grew up with. They've stayed closely connected. He sighs, joking that even though none of them have ever seen his face, they could at least have thanked him for the gifts. He pauses, then lightly slaps his cheeks. Correcting himself, he admits that he's already grateful enough. At least they didn't destroy the entire kingdom by awakening as the 5 deadly sins. As long as they're living well, he's genuinely happy. The scene shifts to Caliburn in the central district of Kurtham. Caliburn, the domain of high-ranking nobles, houses the grand estate of the illustrious Solar Eclipse Knight Order. Inside, countless knights train relentlessly. Standing in front of the window is Deus, clad in full knight armor. He looks imposing, calm, and strikingly composed. His title echoes throughout Caliburn, Deus Mycalian, captain of the Solar Eclipse Knight Order, youngest master knight in history. A young girl waves at him excitedly. "Brother Deus," he smiles in response. He looks far older and more mature than he did as a child. A faint smirk crosses his lips as memories surface, still embarrassing even after a full year. He remembers the day he lost everything. The black creatures, his sister falling into darkness. The uncontrollable rage that consumed him as he tried to protect her. That hatred dragged him down again and again until he nearly lost himself entirely. He had fallen into the abyss. Being saved by the great moon alone wasn't enough. He had sworn his allegiance out of desperation, believing it was the only path left. Deus recalls Yusha's voice and the promise he once made to take revenge with his own hands. Working under the blue moon placed him on countless dangerous missions. He never complained, never hesitated. Each assignment became another step toward one day facing the black things. After several years, he finally received his first personal order. When he opened the final letter, confusion washed over him. This order was different from anything the Blue Moon had ever issued before. It led him to a small inn in southern Caliburn where he was instructed to retrieve a gift. At first, he felt nothing. Gifts meant little to someone who had lost everything. But the moment he arrived, Deus immediately understood what his master Alan was trying to give him. The gift was his sister, alive and safe, waiting for him. His eyes trembled as he read the final line of the letter. The gift from the Great Moon is your family, the one you believed you had lost forever. Deus broke down. Tears streamed uncontrollably as he rushed forward and wrapped his arms around her, shaking. His sister stared at him in shock, unable to believe what she was seeing. To Deus, she was more precious than his own life. He held her tightly, his voice breaking as he tried to speak through his tears. He said the sister he believed to be dead was still alive. Overwhelmed by pain and relief, he asked her what had happened after they were separated. Silly clung to his arm, crying as well, offering him a faint but comforting smile. Later, they sat together with cups of tea. When she had calmed down, she began to explain. After being dragged away, she had spent a long time trapped in darkness. The memories resurfaced vividly as she spoke. She described being locked inside a pitch-black cage, waiting for the day she would be taken out and killed. When that moment finally came, someone terrifyingly strong appeared. That person grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the light, allowing her to escape. Years later, when she was nearly sold to a slave merchant, another powerful figure protected her again. A blade cut through the attackers, saving her for the second time. That person was Alan's knight, Evan. Returning to the present, Silly explained that after those events, she began receiving precious medicine from a sponsor. Holding Alan's letter, she repeated his words carefully. She explained that the letter had been handed to her directly and that Alan continued to send medicine and support without fail. The name written on every letter was Alan Palacio, and the message stated that everything was sent specifically for Silly. Alan had ordered it to be delivered personally. At that moment, Deus finally understood. The Great Moon had been acting for his sake all along. Alan had known how precious Silly was to him. Silly smiled brightly, saying that the great sponsor had helped her more than she could ever express. Deus felt overwhelming gratitude. Alan had supported them through Evan in order to hide his true identity. Deus was stunned. Shock spread across his face as he whispered that the Great Moon had been protecting his sister under his own name. He couldn't understand how Alan even knew about their situation. He had never spoken about his family to anyone. Only Yusha had noticed the black lamp that once targeted him. Gripping his shoulders, Deus questioned how the Great Moon could know everything. The Great Moon was known as an unparalleled prodigy, someone who seemed aware of every hidden truth. Memories flickered in Deus's mind, moments involving Yusha. Her anxiety, her nervous warnings, her repeated insistence that a sword must never act on its own, everything snapped into place. Darkness washed over his thoughts as he realized the foolish one had been himself, and yet there was mercy. The Great Moon had known everything and still chose not to punish him. His body trembled as the truth struck him fully. Silly gently pulled him back from his spiral, asking why he looked so shocked. Inside, Deus understood. His sword had acted on its own, yet the Great Moon had shown restraint. The narrator's view widened, revealing how Alan, the Great Moon, had guided Deus's life like a carefully arranged strategy, almost as if moving pieces on a board. Deus realized that all those years he had been consumed by hatred and revenge, never seeing the truth behind it all. He looked at his sister. Her cheerful expression carried the light of someone who had survived unimaginable darkness. She had lived, that alone was a gift beyond measure. Yusha's words echoed in his mind once more. She had always said that one day he would understand why she followed the man who was truly terrifying, the Great Moon. Now he finally did. She'd never been a fanatic, she follows Alan of her own will. And yet he prayed to Alan as if he were a god, now he knew why. Resolve tightened his expression. He declared that he would reach the pinnacle of Caliburn, becoming a true master knight, and form a knight order composed of the finest swordsmen, all devoted to the Great Moon. He finally understood why Yusha called Alan her god and savior. From that moment on, Deus felt nothing but unwavering loyalty. Driven by his decision, he fully embraced the path of sword mastery and the creation of his knight order. The story of their rise had begun. Sometime later, Deus stood on a balcony. A tall knight approached and informed him that the time had come. Deus stepped forward and looked down at the assembled knight order. With a steady voice, he announced that this expedition would become the first stepping stone of the solar eclipse. Meanwhile, Alan sat quietly outside. The place felt peaceful, perhaps because all the children had grown into capable warriors. He glanced down at his book and muttered that everyone had flown away from him. For now, he no longer wanted any more information. His life felt increasingly chaotic, yet he reminded himself to focus. He joked to himself that he needed to stop writing in cursive and promised to write more clearly next time. After returning from the labyrinth, he had shifted his attention to researching the strange phrases he encountered there. Letting out a quiet chuckle, he felt satisfied that his reports were finally complete. Leaning back, he reviewed the concepts he had been studying. The reinforcement of magical imprints, the behavior of refraction within spells. Refraction, he noted, strengthened imperfections inside a completed spell, allowing its rage to expand outward. Repulsion, on the other hand, distorted the spell's structure and influenced the transition of a fired projectile. The phenomenon continued to amaze him. With the laws of the world in his grasp, his ability to manipulate the rules that governed reality, he could push magic beyond its original limits. Through observation, he determined that blue light reinforced parallel magic, such as electrical attacks. He formed a theory that diffraction lines enabled penetration, creating a critical effect upon impact. When he struck the golem earlier, the massive creature had been annihilated instantly. Despite its size and strength, it had been completely vaporized. To him, rules mattered above all else. Not a single phrase within a spell could be mismatched. Still, with his current mana reserves, he could only unleash magic of that scale once per day. Fatigue weighed heavily on him. It had taken an enormous amount of time just to understand this much. His expression grew serious as he reflected on the world's limitations. The hand signs and phrases of Babylonia had been lost long ago. There was no written record of them anywhere in this world. He was forced to research alone, rebuilding the missing pieces from scratch. Even so, he found himself enjoying the challenge. After all, he had only learned magic for self-protection. Now he prepared the spell he had been refining for 2 months. Placing his fingers together, a crackling purple light formed in front of him. In his mind, Alan described the process clearly. Removing the focal point of the mana sphere would create the imbalance needed to generate lightning. A small sphere of purple lightning appeared. He considered it weak, a limited fixation spell. Yet the moment he finished the chant, a wave of thunder rippled outward, completing the structure. He continued chanting, compression. The condensed magic cannon tightened as the phrases broke apart and reshaped themselves. At the final instant, he completed the last hand sign, activating the purpose built into the spell. A violent thunder cannon erupted upward. Massive energy flooded the area, shaking the ground as brilliant blue lightning surged into the sky like a roaring tide. Alan stood frozen. He couldn't believe the force he had just released. The order of the spell phrases mattered more than anything. When he had attempted to use breakdown first, the spell had failed instantly. Then a voice echoed behind him. Impossible? Alan turned sharply. Shock stiffened his expression when he saw who was standing there. Zenonia Kalia, the red-haired woman, the villain of her kingdom, the murderer of her father, and the one who had always sought to turn Alan into her puppet, stood beside her butler. Her eyes were locked onto the fading remnants of lightning still crackling in the air. The butler's eyes widened. Origin magic. Using origin magic meant one stood at the level of a 7th circle mage. Alan stiffened again. The term origin circle was completely unfamiliar to him. He had never heard his abilities described like that, yet the truth was undeniable. Someone had just named what he had become. Alan stared at the two of them, their exaggerated expressions bordering on absurd. He couldn't help but think how foolish they looked in that moment. Their reactions dragged his thoughts back to his academy days, to a memory of his former professor. Back in the present, Zenonia Kalia, who had ruled Zenonia County from the shadows by turning her father into a puppet for years, had come to Count Palacio's estate for 2 reasons. The first was to gauge Alan's intentions as the new Count Palacio. Despite holding information that could devastate Zenonia County, Alan had never used it. The second reason was to assess the power of the organization rumored to be under Count Palacio's control. Of course, simply meeting him wouldn't reveal the full scope of such a shadowy force, but Zenonia Kalia had her own methods. And today she had just glimpsed the edges of that power. There was a wizard named Viancle. He had once proposed a new theory on forgotten-era magic within the Magic Tower, earning widespread academic acclaim. However, he was later expelled due to the excessively inhumane nature of his magical experiments. Even after his expulsion, his rank remained at the 5th tier. Viancle was powerful enough to wipe out an entire battalion on his own. Kalia had brought him along by offering support for his experiments, forming an alliance with him. Lady Kalia subtly glanced at Viancle. His mouth was still slightly open, his expression stiff with anxiety. She was surprised. His face was always arrogant, and he never spoke politely, especially not to her, despite her being the one who supported him. But now his expression was clearly abnormal. Fear, she had never seen fear on him before. Curiosity and unease mixed within her chest. If he's reacting like this, she thought, could it really be that the magic we saw earlier was an origin spell? The thought passed quickly as she refocused and met Alan's gaze. His eyes were unchanged, cold, detached. As if the situation held no value to him at all. What brings you to my county? He asked flatly. Kalia broke the silence first. My apologies, Count Palacio. I've been rude. Though she still bore the title of Lady Zenonia publicly, she addressed him respectfully. She apologized for entering the training grounds unannounced and for the sudden visit. I've wanted to meet you for quite some time. Before she could continue, Alan interrupted. There's no need to blame yourself, but let me clarify one thing. He continued calmly. What I used wasn't origin magic. He added, my magical ability isn't particularly exceptional. If I had to rank it, it would be around the 2nd tier. The mage beside you should have noticed that the spell had no practical effect. Naturally, Kalia didn't believe him. Even without deep knowledge of magic, she could tell that what Alan had displayed was anything but ordinary. She glanced back at Viancle. His expression had worsened. Despite his grim face, he seemed to understand the true meaning behind Alan's words. It was a warning, say nothing. Viancle forced the words out. It seems I was mistaken, Kalia stiffened. This was the first time in 5 years she had heard him speak politely. He normally spoke casually, even arrogantly. Alan let out a quiet sigh. You're capable, so you've likely already noticed. That magic is of no real use. He shifted the conversation forward without hesitation. Now that the misunderstanding is resolved, what brings you here? Kalia quickly collected herself. It's nothing important. I was in the area on business and thought of you, so I decided to stop by briefly. Is that so? Alan asked. Yes. After a moment of thought, Alan replied, unfortunately, I'm quite busy. I won't be able to chat for long. Kalia bowed slightly, preparing to leave. That's fine, I only wish to pay my respects. But Alan spoke again, his tone indifferent. If you're looking for conversation, you might consider visiting the Duke of Altia. I think the two of you would get along quite well. Lady Zenonia smiled politely. If you say so, I'll consider visiting the Duke of Altia. Her mouth felt dry as her carriage gradually disappeared into the distance. Evan spoke up. Why would Lady Zenonia from that notorious Western family visit you? Alan replied simply, how would I know? Evan looked puzzled, but this time Alan truly had no explanation. Even he couldn't guess why Kalia had come. He muttered to himself that it was troublesome he had shown her his magic at all. If word spread that he could use Origin, a spell reserved for supreme wizards, it might sound advantageous at first, but in reality it would be nothing but a headache. In a dark fantasy world like this, madmen eager to challenge the strong were everywhere. Alan doubted Lady Zenonia would actually visit the Duke. Even so, directing her toward Altia had been intentional. It was a message. A message that he had no interest in associating with her. With that, Alan ended his thoughts on Kalia. Meanwhile, inside the carriage, Kalia finally spoke. Was the magic Count Palacio used really Origin? Unlike his usual immediate responses, Viancle remained silent. Just as Kalia was about to press him again, he finally answered. It wasn't Origin, she frowned. If it wasn't Origin, then what was that display earlier? Clearly confused, Kalia waited for an explanation. Viancle trembled. Origin, he began, is the endpoint of all wizards, a kind of canvas. He swallowed before continuing. It is a canvas granted only to those who have established magic as an absolute truth where they can paint their own laws upon it. Magic with unique arrangements and manifestation formulas etched onto an unchanging foundation, that is Origin. Then his tone shifted. But Count Palacio's magic was different. He clenched his hands. It wasn't drawing on the canvas, to be precise, it was tearing the canvas apart. Kalia stiffened. Viancle continued, his voice shaking. In other words, he was twisting truths that should never be altered. I only observed it for a moment, he muttered, since I was using the observation eye at your request. But I saw it clearly. Lightning that should not have remained stable, laws collapsing mid-manifestation, and yet the spell still completed itself flawlessly. It was a miracle, he whispered, then he fell silent. Jet black sclera, crimson pupils, and 2 red rings encircling them. Those eyes had appeared when the Count cast his spell. Fear filled Viancle's gaze as he recalled them. If his suspicion was correct, Count Palacio had touched the power of a forgotten ancient god. Viancle forcibly cut off his own thoughts, even using magic to suppress them. Having studied ancient knowledge, he knew how dangerous it was to dig deeper. Then he spoke again. Let me give you one piece of advice. His voice was firm. Never make an enemy of him. Do not oppose Count Palacio. That's all I can say. With that, Viancle fell silent. Lady Zenonia said nothing either. As the carriage rolled on, Kalia recalled Alan's expressionless face and his calm, detached gaze. Without realizing it, she let out a self-deprecating smile. Through Viancle's words, she had finally understood something. There had never been a point in trying to decipher Count Palacio's intentions. And worse, she realized she had already become nothing more than a pawn on his chessboard, roughly 5 months later. 2 full years had passed since the children were sent down their individual paths. Inside his office, Alan asked calmly, any new information, preferably about the kids? Evan shook his head. Nothing regarding the children, Count. But there is something else. Alan glanced up, uninterested at first, then Evan spoke. Zenonia County and the Altia Duchy have formed an alliance. The words hit like lightning. Alan froze. What did you just say? The 2 pillars of the underworld have united, Evan confirmed. On the surface it looks harmless, but in the shadows the alliance is real. Alan dragged a hand down his face in frustration. I went through all that trouble raising those little sinners, he muttered, and now the world throws me a shadow alliance instead. Is the Asteria kingdom collapsing next? Exhaustion washed over him. Did Kalia really take his words seriously? Visit Duke Altia. He certainly hadn't meant form an alliance. He slapped his forehead. Come on. It has to be temporary. With Kalia's personality cold, arrogant, hostile, it shouldn't last. Still, I should prepare. He picked up his pen and began writing. Kalia, if I came off blunt, if I sounded cold, I did not intend to insult you. He stared at the line. This doesn't sound like an apology at all. Still, he folded the letter and handed it to Evan. I'll leave this to you, Evan nodded. I'll deliver it through the Machinery Guild. I'll also continue searching for information about the children. Alan leaned back, scanning several reports. I wonder what Raiden and Xiaoring are doing now, he muttered. Xiaoring wouldn't have died right. The thought slipped out before he could stop it. He continued reading. If she followed the instructions and found the gift, she should have become the pinnacle of all fighters, Baba Yaga. Alan reviewed the description of the golden mane beast's hand glove, the treasure he had given Xiaoring. If she received that item, she wasn't born with the sin of pride. She could have become a powerful warrior instead of a fallen sinner, he sighed. It was written right there in the description. If I had explained its hidden value, she could have sold it or used it for funding. With her talent, she could have survived anywhere. Night settled over the desert colony in a quiet, shimmering glow. Deep inside a hidden cave, Xiaoring stretched her arms with a tired yawn, waving lazily as she walked forward. At last, she murmured cheerfully, the ordeal is finally over. She lifted the golden hand glove, the gift given by Alan, the Great Moon. Oh, Great Moon, thank you, she whispered, eyes sparkling. This gift is incredible. Clutching the glove tightly, she recalled the pale gold, kitten-like spirit that had appeared earlier. I always thought the essence of the Golden Mane tribe was just some random charm, she said softly. But what I heard as a child wasn't a fairy tale at all. Memory surfaced, her mother's gentle voice, the warmth of their old home. The forgotten pride of her tribe, our kin are descendants of the Golden Mane tribe. Her mother had once told her, kings of all beast kin, the essence of the Golden Mane tribe is a high relic passed down for hundreds of years. It grants us power and divine authority. Returning to the present, Xiaoring held her breath. She had found that very essence inside this desert cave. The moment she put on the golden glove, pain surged through her entire body, real, overwhelming. Inside her consciousness, she faced trial after trial, each one tearing at her mind. Yet she endured. Looking at her hand, she whispered, "I once nearly died as a test subject, yet the great moon saved my life." The memory stabbed at her heart. An abandoned orphan treated as nothing. "But Alan changed my fate," she said, her voice trembling. "He gave me the power to take revenge on the black dragon, the monster who killed my parents." She clenched her fist. Golden aura burst from her palm, flooding the cave like sunlight tearing through darkness. "I must repay the great moon's grace." Energy surged violently from her body, golden essence blooming outward with enough force to shake dust from the walls. She stared at her glowing hand in awe. "This gift was never meant to make me an ordinary gladiator," she said quietly. "Not at all." Testing the glove's strength, she felt her awakened lineage roar within her blood. "All I need to do," she declared, "is become the strongest gladiator alive, gather the scattered golden main relics, and restore our tribe's glory." Golden light erupted again, brighter, fiercer, unstoppable. Raising her hand high, Xiaoring spoke with absolute resolve. "I will slay the black dragon." Moments later, she stepped out of the cave and gazed up at the beautiful moon. With confidence, she said, "All of this is for my savior." "Let us begin." The golden mane commanders of all beast kin, kings among their race, would rise again under the blue moon after 500 years. Back at the estate, Alan held several documents when a small detail triggered a vague memory. Before he could dwell on it, Evan spoke. "The Information Guild obtained news about the children. I wanted to tell you back at the training grounds, but I forgot." Evan continued, "Xiaoring has been performing exceptionally well in the colony. She's even earned the title the Golden Flash." Alan tensed. "Golden Flash? Where have I heard that before?" He frowned briefly, then exhaled. Alan asked, "What about Raiden? I haven't heard from him since he said he was sent to Raxus." Evan adjusted the sword at his waist. "There is information on him, but it's still being verified." Then he added, "By the way, Evan, aren't you supposed to be busy?" Evan froze, confusion spreading across his face like a short-circuited machine. "My lord, why are you looking at me like that all of a sudden? I did everything you told me." His voice trembled. Alan smiled faintly. "You need to prepare. It takes at least a month to reach the magic tower." Evan's eyes widened. "What, the magic tower? I've never even heard you mention that." Shock struck him like thunder. Alan replied casually, "Easy. Oh, did I not mention it before?" Evan sighed. "It should only take a week to reach the green magic tower." "We're going to the blue magic tower," Alan said. Evan blinked. "Ah, that's near Labyrinth City. That is far." He straightened immediately. "I'll begin preparations at once, my lord." Alan nodded. Sometime later, Alan collapsed onto the sofa like an exhausted old man. "A month in a carriage," he muttered. "Just thinking about it makes me tired," he sighed. "But what choice do I have? The item that can support my small, precious mana pool is there." A faint memory surfaced. The massive city appeared in his mind just as it had in the game. "Even though countless players visited the labyrinth, no one ever reached the end," Alan said. "I only made it to the 115th floor because I used a cheat code." He scoffed lightly. "Those developers were insane. There were even more floors beyond that. The item I need is on the 151st floor." He continued, "Because of that, the job of official magic appraiser became incredibly popular. It guarantees a stable life." His thoughts drifted to Rin, her calm eyes, her sharp intellect, her talent with stones and elixirs. "She'll be taking the appraiser exam soon," Alan murmured. "With her talent, she should pass easily." But as the room grew quiet, doubt crept in. "Maybe I gave Rin too small a gift compared to the others," he said faintly. He leaned back. "All it does is suppress equipment effects. If that isn't enough, I should send her additional support." The scene shifts to Labyrinth City, Larthania, a city ruled by no one, a land of explorers, mercenaries, and endless opportunity. Beyond the crowded streets and countless shops of the southern district stood a discreet appraisal shop known as Merd. Though hidden, its reputation had spread among nobles and rank explorers for its rare specialized services. Inside Merd, a man stood frozen, stunned by what he had just witnessed. From deeper within the shop, a calm voice echoed, "The appraisal is complete, my lord." Only then did the truth settle in. The masked girl standing before him was Rin. She had concealed her identity flawlessly. Holding an object between her hands, Rin explained calmly, "This device ignites flame using mana," demonstrating it with quiet confidence. The lord nodded. "Thank you, as always. Let me see." He carefully examined the lamp and murmured, "A relic that can be imprinted. What is the imprinted ability?" Rin answered without hesitation. "A small amount of mana will keep the flame burning for at least an hour." The lord smiled. "Its efficiency has improved drastically. Very good." He genuinely appreciated Rin's precision and intelligence. "Thank you, as always," she replied. Silence settled inside the shop. Rin removed her mask, her expression softening briefly before her gaze shifted to another item on the table. She picked it up carefully. "This item can also be imprinted," she said. "In fact, this shop has become famous because of its extraordinary imprinted abilities, things unseen anywhere else." At the center of the shop, a mystical relic rested on a pedestal. Alan's voice echoed in her memory, a gift from the Great Moon, an item sent directly by him. Rin stepped closer. Excitement flickered across her face. "When the Great Moon told me to become an appraiser, I didn't understand why," she whispered, but thinking about Alan made everything clearer. His true identity, a friend of Palion from the forgotten era of the Outer Gods. Everything he's done has been to eliminate the black things. When she first read the letter ordering her to go to Labyrinth City and become a magic oppressor, she couldn't connect it to that goal. What does becoming an oppressor have to do with killing the black things? She stepped fully into the appraisal chamber. The Eye of the Stalker, she whispered. It identifies items below a certain mana threshold to assist in oppression. The relic was dangerous, deadly even. Red demonic chains wrapped tightly around it and a dark presence seeped from within. It was nothing like ordinary magical wisdom. Rin reached out and touched the chains. This substance, it doesn't exist in any library. The device trembled. Energy surged violently as the seals shattered. A burst of blue light flooded the room as the Eye of the Stalker awakened fully. Mana spiraled around her like a living storm. Rin leaned closer, resolve settling into her eyes. To gain the strength needed to fight the black things, she said quietly, I must awaken this relic myself for the Great Moon. I still have 252 sacrifices remaining. She explained calmly, in exchange for raising the relic's stats, it absorbs something from each sacrifice, instantly altering the eye. It only reacts to specific high-tier relics. If the wrong item is offered, the entire stack disappears. She understood the condition clearly. The relic demanded many high-tier offerings to ascend fully. When it finally awakened, it would become a weapon entrusted by Alan, the Great Moon. This is something only I can do, she murmured. Lifting the divine eye-shaped relic, she declared, I was born with the Library of Eternity. Everything I do is for killing the Black Wolf. Her voice hardened with resolve. All is according to the will of the Great Moon. 3 weeks later, Blue Magic Tower. The tower master was absent. A small girl stood in the entry hall. Her appearance was cute, but her tone was impatient. State your business and leave. This was Fina, the wise tower master of the Blue Magic Tower, a sixth-circle mage despite her childlike appearance. She glanced at Alan and waved dismissively. I'm very busy. Say it quickly. Alan stood there, momentarily stunned by her attitude. Her words left him silent as he stared at the tiny mage in disbelief. At this point in the timeline, she was still only the wise tower master. The main story hadn't begun yet. But in the game, she would later be remembered as a once-in-a-lifetime genius, a prodigy who reached the 8th circle at age 20 and eventually became the Tower Master. Alan straightened his posture. I am Count Palacio, he said. As stated earlier, I came to discuss the matter of the time gate. The girl froze. Papers slid across the desk as she scrambled through stacks of documents. Wait, what did you say? You can eliminate the time gate, she continued rummaging. Where is that document? Maintaining his composure, Alan explained. The time gate is cracking. It connects to a mysterious subspace that appears in areas of frequent magic usage that causes widespread destruction. Demons and disasters emerge because of it. Fina activated a detection spell. Her eyes glimmered as she scanned him. She scoffed. With talent this low, what exactly do you think you can do? She waved him off. Whatever. Alan froze. This isn't how it's supposed to go. He needed her cooperation. I need an answer, he said, forcing his voice to remain steady. She shut her eyes tightly, irritation clear on her face. You want to eliminate the time gate and take the treasure, right? Of course you do. Everyone says that. She slammed her hand on the desk. Do you have any idea how many people come here every single day with the same story? Alan felt wronged. Swallowing his frustration, he replied, I'm telling the truth. Guide me to the time gate and I will prove it. Inside, he wondered why she refused to believe him. His thoughts were cut short as she glared back at him, completely unconvinced. The Vice Tower leader clicked her tongue sharply. Listen, she said, I get that you want something big enough to change how people see you. People are starting to say the only reason you became Count is because you got lucky when your siblings died. A violent wave of mana erupted from her body, chaotic, oppressive, swirling through the tower like a raging storm. That doesn't mean you can barge in here and cause trouble for us. She had no idea who she was provoking. She didn't know she was speaking to the Great Moon. Alan froze, stunned. He swallowed and muttered, there's a rumor like that. Well, it's not entirely wrong, but still she's insane. Despite her small stature and frantic behavior, she clearly kept up with every development outside the tower. Alan stared at her, realizing just how terrifying she truly was. This Vice Tower leader, he thought, she's scary. Evan leaned in and whispered, his face pale. Not going to lie, she scared me too. When I got irritated earlier, she shut me down instantly. And that wasn't even her full mana. If we do anything stupid, we'll drown in it. Alan sighed, I'm honestly desperate right now. Then something shifted. He straightened his back, stepped forward, and faced the Vice Tower leader directly. If I fail to eliminate the time gate, he declared, I will surrender my entire property to the Magic Tower. She stared at him, still speaking rapidly. Nonsense, I see. Alan released his aura, his voice turned cold. If you wish, I'll swear an oath. Not a bad deal for a little of your time, don't you think? For the first time, she gasped. Her eyes widened as she looked at Alan properly. Moments later, the two stood inside the tower's restricted zone. The time gate is here, the Vice Tower leader said. As promised, your entire fortune becomes mine the moment you fail. Alan stepped forward without hesitation. That won't happen, just watch. She narrowed her eyes sharply. Perfect timing. I was wondering whether you were the true mastermind of your territory or just an incompetent man who got lucky. Her lips curled into a cruel smile. Now I really want to see what kind of mess you're planning to create. If you fail, everything you own becomes mine. A low, mocking chuckle escaped her lips. He's closer to the ladder, she thought. Her gaze swept over Alan from head to toe. Despite that inhuman atmosphere around you, your mana pool is tiny. Your sensing ability is barely above average. You're stuck on the edge of the second circle, she sneered. What exactly do you plan to do with such pathetic magic? You're completely useless. A box appeared between them, containing the distorted fragment of the time gate. The truth was simple. There was barely any need to close it. In 3 months, it would naturally collapse after releasing its remaining relics. The research team had already confirmed this. Not a single mage capable of closing it will appear, the Vice Tower leader scoffed, and yet this time gate has plagued the Blue Magic Tower for over 2 years. Her tone was dismissive. If you can't do anything, leave. Alan ignored her completely, her expression twisted in irritation. She laughed sharply. You're going to use your hand as a staff? Even ancient tomes call that a primal method, something barely more than a fairy tale. She tried to stop him, her voice rising. Hey, you stupid brats, stop enchanting right now. Enchantment is an ancient magic, you can't possibly… But Alan didn't even look at her. He continued chanting quietly as if she didn't exist. A strange shift rippled through the chamber. Darkness crept in from the edges, swallowing the light. The air grew so cold it pierced to the bone. The Vice Tower leader froze. What? What is this? A chilling terror washed over her as the room dimmed completely. I can't move. Everything had stopped. Time itself had frozen. Desperate, she activated the divine eye, forcing her vision to pierce the phenomenon. The moment she saw it, her expression collapsed. Particles cracked apart in midair as if reality itself were shattering. Behind them, a gigantic red eye appeared, a demon's eye, ancient, violent, insane. She trembled. That thing, it's insane. A deep crimson aura erupted from Alan's body. The monstrous eye snapped fully open, locking onto her. The killing intent was overwhelming. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't look away. Her thoughts spiraled. How is this possible for someone barely at the second circle? Her abilities ceased entirely. Frozen under its pressure, she couldn't move. A voice echoed from behind Alan, absolute. Commanding, stop your thoughts, cut them off. The Vice Tower leader went pale, sweat drenched her face as she stammered, I understand the demand. The demon god's eyes shut instantly. Time began to flow again. The room fell into complete silence. When Alan turned back, he said calmly, finally, the gate is closed. His expression was unchanged, as if nothing extraordinary had happened. He picked up the relic. I'll be taking the relic from this time gate. Inside his thoughts, he muttered, I still need to use it a few more times, so I added a convincing spell. Did she buy it? The mage girl trembled even harder. She struggled to steady herself, still trapped in the fear that lingered from moments ago. I won't tell anyone, she whispered. Alan frowned inwardly. Why did she look like that? Did my bluff fail? He sighed lightly and said, I appreciate the concern, but that won't be necessary. When he took a step toward her, she stumbled backward, nearly falling. Her voice trembled as she hurriedly added, I'll keep silent, I won't say a word. I can keep a secret, I swear, honestly, seriously. Alan stared at her in confusion. Why is she suddenly acting like this? Outside, the scene shifted. Alan walked toward Evan and said simply, let's return. Before he could leave, the mage girl called out, wait one moment. She held out several small vials. This is a mana potion I made. Alan accepted them and examined the contents. They were half-crafted by the Vice Tower leader herself in top grade. She hesitated before asking quietly, do you really like it? Alan blinked. 2 bottles of this cost as much as several lower-tier relics. I nearly fainted when I checked the price. Is she really this grateful just because I closed the time gate? But the mage girl trembled as she continued, that's what the Count requested. I will absolutely remain silent. If you want, I can even swear a mana oath for certainty and loyalty. Alan froze, an oath for something like this. What is she even talking about? He opened his mouth, then stopped. She's clearly misunderstanding something. Before he could explain, the air rumbled. Magical chains formed overhead. The Tower Master raised her staff toward the sky and began chanting, initiating a mana oath. She glanced proudly toward Alan and declared, see, I keep my word perfectly. Alan felt a dull pressure in his chest, I see. She had no intention of clearing up the misunderstanding, and he had no way to stop her. Outside the tower, Alan stepped into Evan's carriage. Evan examined the item in Alan's hand. My lord, is that the relic from the gate? It looks more primitive than I expected. Does it live up to its reputation? Alan fastened the bracelet to his wrist. Either way, this is something I absolutely needed. He focused on the seal of the unholy one embedded within it. I'm glad I secured it. The chain absorbed ambient mana, the stone glowing faintly. It's working, Alan murmured. The storage capacity wasn't large, but it was enough. His mana drained rapidly and he slumped back with a quiet sigh. A body with less mana than a support tool, he reminded himself calmly. My goal is magical research and self-preservation, not combat. This is enough. Evan tilted his head, confused by Alan's exhaustion. Alan exhaled slowly. By the way, what exactly did she misunderstand? The Vice Tower leader's voice echoed in his mind. You're exactly like a second circle wizard. Alan frowned. Was she mocking me? The reaction felt familiar. Kalia had behaved the same way once, utterly shaken after seeing his butler. The memory still unsettled him. He shook his head lightly. It doesn't matter, I won't meet any of them again. The scene shifted to Duke Altia's estate. Inside the mansion, Duke Altia sat calmly with a cup of tea. It has been a while, she said warmly. I hope you enjoy your stay, young lady. Lady Zenonia narrowed her eyes slightly before smiling sharply. Of course. You haven't changed either, Altia smiled in return. It's convenient that we don't need to discuss class or authority between us. Both women understood the situation clearly. Lady Zenonia had come to propose an alliance. Count Palacio's foresight is remarkable, as always, Zenonia said. She recalled the moment she received his suggestion to visit Altia. Only after following it did his intentions become clear. Upon arriving, both women realized the same truth. Neither of them could match Palacio. Their alliance existed because he allowed it. And yet, despite that realization, working together felt natural. Altia spoke first. The conference is next month. Why come today? Zenonia replied. The Count sent a letter the day I arrived. It gave me an excuse to visit early. Loria frowned slightly. What excuse? Zenonia handed her the letter. Loria skimmed through it, her expression darkening. Some nobles complained to me about your visit that day. She paused. This command, the topic shifted to several noble factions. Many nobles don't suit me, Loria muttered. Zenonia nodded. It doesn't read like a normal apology letter. Something about it feels deliberate. Loria leaned back. There must be a scheme hidden inside. Zenonia smiled faintly. Exactly, that's why we need to discuss it, she continued calmly. Baron Kenia belongs to the noble faction. Marquis Malentino is aligned with the royal faction. Viscount Valanda as well, she looked at Loria, and Duke Altiu stand between them. Loria summarized quietly, which means he sides with neither. Zenonia finished the thought. He intends to push out the nobles heading toward extinction. Both women shuddered. The idea that Alan, whom they already considered dangerous, had sent that letter unsettled them deeply. Loria stared ahead. This must be why he needed my reputation and named me Duke. And the hegemon of the West stands with him, she added softly. That certainty explained everything. Zenonia nodded calmly. Let's discuss the plan. Meanwhile, inside the blue magic tower, Fenia collapsed onto her desk. The tower master approached quietly. Tell me in detail, Fenia, he said calmly. Why were you so nervous? She lifted her head slowly, still shaken. Her thoughts drifted back to Alan. Outside, Alan sat casually eating a roasted sweet potato. Evan asked, Are you all right, Lord Alan? Alan nodded. I almost fainted, but it's still delicious. He let out a tired breath and added, I want to go home. Yusha's letter should arrive soon. The scene shifted to the Holy Kingdom, glowing beneath a beautiful sky. Yusha stood within the sanctuary wearing her priestly robes. Elegant, radiant, breathtaking. Those who saw her could not help but wonder what fate awaited someone like her, a gift of beauty, yet capable of becoming something terrifying. Sometime earlier, at the Blue Magic Tower, Master Selim Micardo had just returned from a long journey when a faint sense of unease crossed his mind. He could no longer feel the presence of the time gate. When he entered her office, he found her slumped over her desk, visibly exhausted. Noticing his arrival, she forced herself upright and reported that she had completed every task he had entrusted to her during his absence. Selim froze. This was the first time he had ever seen Fenia behave like this. Normally, the Vice Tower Master greeted him with irritation or sharp complaints. He asked calmly whether something had happened. Instead of answering, Fenia collapsed forward again, resting her forehead against the desk. Selim observed her quietly. Fenia had become Vice Tower Master at an exceptionally young age, blessed with overwhelming magical talent. Her arrogance had once been sky-high, nearly unbearable, but he had never bothered correcting her personality. Once she reached the seventh circle, humility would come naturally. That was why her current state felt so strange. Letting out an awkward laugh, Selim mentioned that his business trip to the north had taken longer than expected. He casually asked whether she had been overwhelmed with work in his absence. At last, Fenia spoke. With a drained expression, she explained everything she could, carefully avoiding certain details. She revealed that the time gate had been closed and that the one responsible was Count Alan Palacio. However, she could not explain how it had been done. She stated plainly that she was bound by an oath and could say no more. Besides, she added, there truly wasn't much she could explain in detail. What kind of phenomenon could leave Fenia, someone normally bursting with pride, this subdued? Was it some incomprehensible form of magic, or something even closer to origin itself? He gently placed a hand on Fenia's head. She did not swat it away, too exhausted and shaken to react. That alone told him how deeply the experience had affected her. With a faint smile, Selim leaned back. Count Alan Palacio of the Asteria Kingdom. That man is far more interesting than I expected. The scene shifted to Alan Palacio's residence. A full month had passed since Alan's return from the Blue Magic Tower, since obtaining the Mark of the Corrupted. He had devoted himself almost entirely to research, specifically the study of phases and their application within structured magical arrays. He realized he had uncovered a new rule governing phase usage. There seemed to be a connection between where a phase was placed and how it functioned, but the exact relationship still eluded him. Footsteps sounded behind him. Alan turned, momentarily startled, to see Evan standing at the entrance. Evan stared at the surroundings in disbelief. He muttered in awe that Count Alan's magic seemed to grow stronger every time he witnessed it. Alan let out a quiet sigh. Is that really the case? Evan nodded. It doesn't feel like second circle magic anymore. Compared to a few months ago, your spells operate on a completely different level. Alan glanced toward the crater. An ordinary gravity spell should never cause this kind of destruction, he said calmly. Even at maximum output, second circle gravity magic shouldn't be able to crush something so completely. Inwardly, Alan acknowledged the truth. I really am getting stronger, and this doesn't feel like an illusion. The only improvement he had consciously achieved was greater stability, not increased destructive power. That made the current situation illogical. Aloud, Alan told Evan there was no clear reason for his magic's firepower to have increased. Maybe I'm just in better physical condition, he suggested. Evan accepted the explanation, though he remained unconvinced. Changing the subject, Evan informed Alan that Yusha's letter had arrived. Alan thanked him and said he would read it in his room. When Evan asked whether he intended to continue practicing magic, Alan replied that he had already exhausted his daily limit, 3 full uses. As Evan departed, Alan's thoughts drifted once more. If there is a reason my magic has grown stronger, could it be a reward tied to a curse? In certain Eastern rituals, curses functioned as sacrifices. The caster lost something, health, lifespan, fate, but received proportional compensation. Alan dismissed the idea almost immediately. There was no one from the East anywhere near him. Could it be faith? He scoffed inwardly. He was merely the count of a small, insignificant territory the underworld barely acknowledged. That made even less sense. Sometimes the only choice was to live on and see where the path led. The scene shifted once more to the Holy Kingdom of Rosario within its capital city, Rional. Rional was a city of pure white stone, a sacred land where people worshipped the goddess of the moon and peace. Inside the eastern prayer hall, Yusha stood silently before a massive statue of the goddess. Soft footsteps echoed behind her. A holy knight approached and greeted her respectfully. "Sister." Yusha turned to face him. Her presence was calm yet overwhelming, graceful, dignified, and strikingly beautiful. With a gentle smile, she asked whether Sir Lok had been well. Lok stiffened slightly. Though Yusha wore no sash of holy grace and held no official rank equal to a paladin, he instinctively knew she stood far above him. Without hesitation, he bowed deeply. He reported that their recent mission had been successful. Thanks to her guidance, they had managed to save 8 children and 25 villagers from a remote settlement in the eastern region. Yusha immediately dismissed the praise. "The credit belongs to you," she said softly. "You're the one who carried it out." Lok shook his head, voice earnest. "No," he insisted. "You taught me everything. You guided me when I was ignorant and lost. I will always be grateful." His thoughts drifted back to the past. For nearly 20 years, Lok had lived in despair, unable to sense divine power. No matter how fervently he prayed, nothing changed. He had stood on the verge of giving up entirely when someone approached him and asked whether there was something he desired with all his heart. That person had been Yusha. With her calm expression and crimson eyes, she told him to place his faith in the moon. Confused and desperate, Lok asked what the moon truly was. Yusha only replied that he would understand once he tried. Clinging to that faint hope, he prayed to the moon for several days, exactly as she instructed. Then impossibly a miracle occurred. He awakened to divine power, finally able to wield it as others did. The joy was overwhelming, but along with joy came doubt. He feared he had committed heresy by placing his faith in the moon rather than directly in goddess Shirnya. Yet the divine artifacts bestowed in the goddess's name still responded to him, glowing brilliantly in his hands. That alone proved his power was real. One day, Lok asked Yusha why she guided him toward the moon instead of the goddess herself. Yusha smiled softly. "Faith is invisible," she explained. "It often takes a long time to manifest. It's easier to draw strength from something that undeniably exists." She told him the moon would always be there, watching over him. In that moment, Lok finally understood. The goddess and the moon were one and the same. For humans burdened with doubt, belief required something they could see. Moved by that realization, Lok bowed deeply before her and offered his thanks from the bottom of his heart. Back in the present, Yusha spoke gently. "If you truly wish to express gratitude," she said, "then let us pray together." Lok answered without hesitation. "I will pray alongside you as many times as necessary." Yusha nodded. "You arrived at the perfect time. The prayer is about to begin. Many believers have already gathered." As the massive doors of the prayer hall opened, a vast crowd came into view. Countless worshippers filled the hall, heads bowed in reverence as a solemn atmosphere settled over the space. Yusha walked forward toward the elevated stage while Lok took his place among the faithful below. Stepping onto the stage, she activated a ceremonial instrument. Then she raised her hand toward the gathered crowd and addressed them with a serene voice. "The prayer to the great moon will now begin." In that moment, she stood not merely as an individual, but as Yusha, a sister of the Holy Kingdom of Rosario. The scene shifts to Palacio's office, where silence hung heavily in the air. Alan sat behind his desk, holding a letter in his hands, one he had already read more than once. It was from Yusha. As Alan reread the contents, he realized again that there was nothing extraordinary written inside, only her daily life. When he finished, Alan released a slow sigh. Nothing special had happened. That meant she was living well. And yet a faint sense of loneliness crept into his heart. Of the 5 children he had guided away from becoming embodiments of sin, only Yusha continued to write. The others remained silent. From their perspective, it made sense. To them, Alan was merely someone from the past, a man they barely knew, someone who intervened briefly and then disappeared. Alan told himself that this was fine. His goal had been fulfilled the moment they chose paths that would not lead to the world's destruction. There was no reason to feel sad. He repeated that thought to himself, forcing acceptance. Still, exhaustion showed on his face. Despite her own busy life, Yusha continued to write regularly. Half of him felt comforted by it. The other half felt a quiet ache he refused to acknowledge. Just then, a voice spoke from within the room. Evan asked if Alan was busy. Startled, Alan lifted his head abruptly. He hadn't even noticed Evan's presence. Evan replied calmly that he had stayed because new intelligence had arrived from the Information Guild. Evan informed him that the intelligence concerned one of the children. Alan's posture tightened. "Continue." According to confirmed information, Raiden had become a pirate. Alan was visibly taken aback. He repeated the word internally, disbelief washing over him. Suppressing his reaction, Alan demanded a full explanation. Evan continued without pause, clearly prepared for the weight of what he was about to reveal. Evan informed Alan that among all the circulating rumors, the most prominent ones concerned Xiaoring and Deus. At the mention of Xiaoring's name, Alan's attention sharpened. Evan explained that Xiaoring had already achieved a 32 consecutive win streak in official combat matches. Out of the 100 victories required for qualification, she had reached nearly 1/3 of the threshold needed to earn the title of Baba Yaga. The moment Alan processed the number, his expression changed. He stopped Evan mid-sentence and asked who currently held the longest win streak. Before Evan could finish answering, Alan recalled the name himself and spoke it aloud. "The Lion King," Evan confirmed it. The Lion King was known for holding a 41 win streak, someone who briefly joined the player's party and dominated battlefields with brute force alone. The colony's military balance depended on individuals like him. He muttered that Xiaoring was on the verge of surpassing even the strongest pillar of the colony. Evan then moved on to the next report. This time it was about Deus. According to the intelligence, Deus had personally executed one of the 8 barbarian chiefs Kurga of the Snowfield. Evan explained that Kurga had been the leader of a barbarian faction that practiced grotesque rituals, transforming themselves into monsters through blood sacrifices. He cautiously asked whether Alan was familiar with them. Alan didn't answer out loud. Instead, his thoughts returned to the past. He knew them all too well. Alan had fought them countless times, and in the end, he himself had been the one to eliminate their god, Ultoris. He reflected silently. Ultoris only manifested after the 5 deadly sins gathered together, which meant one thing: as things stood now, Ultoris would never appear. Alan finally spoke, his voice calm. That means there's no longer any reason to worry about Deus. Evan smiled brightly at the confirmation and added that Deus was now widely acknowledged as standing on the same level as Reinhardt, the first sword. That comparison made Alan pause. Reinhardt was not a title given lightly. Alan considered inwardly that perhaps it was time to meet Deus in person. Evan then proceeded to the 4th report. This one concerned Rin. Rin had become an appraiser, a rare specialist capable of analyzing artifacts and engraving them with black runes that significantly enhanced their abilities. Alan was genuinely surprised. He muttered under his breath that he hadn't even known such a profession existed in this world. More importantly, it brought him a quiet sense of relief. Then his expression shifted abruptly. A realization struck him. He asked Evan the question that truly mattered, the core of it all. Did Raiden really become a pirate? Evan answered without hesitation. He asked whether Alan was familiar with the 7 archipelagos located off the coast of Raxus City. He explained that these archipelagos were infamous domains where the greatest pirates of the era gathered. Then he delivered the truth. Raiden had become the captain of the 1st archipelago, the largest and the most influential. The moment Evan finished speaking, Alan reacted as if struck by lightning. He sprang up so suddenly that he looked like a rag doll pulled by invisible strings. That's impossible. Inside, a strange sense of déjà vu washed over him. Memories from his past life surfaced, old internet posts he had once laughed at. One joke echoed especially loudly. Someone had joked about donating for years so Raiden could live a proud yet ordinary life, only for him to become a pirate. That ridiculous joke had now become reality. Alan felt tears sting his eyes. I didn't send him to Raxus to become a pirate, he muttered. Evan, remaining calm, continued. He explained that Raiden possessed exceptional talent for locating enemies and navigating danger. More importantly, Raiden was a rare sea god kin, a being naturally attuned to the ocean, capable of moving freely through water without restriction. Evan added that the seas surrounding Raxus were filled with priceless relics from ancient eras. That was why he had initially recommended Raiden pursue the path of a treasure hunter, a profession with immense potential and prestige. Evan pointed out that the captain of a great pirate archipelago was, in practice, no different from a lord ruling an island. The position carried political influence. Alan could no longer deny it. He leaned back, thoughts racing. How could Raiden have defeated the previous captain of the 1st archipelago? Alan knew the truth. Every archipelago captain was a superhuman. None of them had ever lost a naval battle. That left only one conclusion. Alan reasoned that Raiden had likely discovered genuine relics of the old era. In his previous life, Alan himself had spent countless hours chasing such relics through the treasure hunter minigame. Now that obsession had become reality. He raised a hand to his forehead, utterly drained. He had always known this world would never unfold according to his expectations, but even so, this outcome wasn't the worst. Letting out a long breath, Alan slumped back into his chair, completely limp, as if life had momentarily left his body. The scene shifts to the very heart of the Principality of Korkia, the colossal maritime city of Raxus. Beyond its sprawling coastline lay the infamous 7 pirate paradises. Among them all, the most powerful was the 1st archipelago. Once this domain had belonged to the great pirate Alcride, the Red Slayer. His reign ended the day he was defeated. The one who struck him down was Raiden. Now Raiden stood atop a rooftop overlooking the sea. He was now the captain of the 1st archipelago. Leaning back against a weather-worn wall, Raiden cracked his neck lazily and muttered that he still did not understand what the Great Moon truly was. He had never been interested enough to think deeply about it. At first, the Great Moon had simply been someone he felt grateful toward, someone who had altered his fate. But because of the Great Moon, he had met Yusha. In truth, Raiden felt he had been following Yusha's will far more than the Great Moon's. It had felt less like devotion and more like obedience to her guidance. So now, when he received a direct order from the Great Moon, an order wrapped in vague words about becoming a treasure hunter, he could not grasp its meaning. What did treasure hunting have to do with revenge? His thoughts darkened as memory surfaced. Once his clan had lived peacefully on a forgotten island. No one knew of their existence. They harmed no one, then the Black Things appeared. Mysterious power descended without warning and massacred his people. Those who survived fled to another continent, only to be hunted down by so-called hunters. His parents, exhausted, wounded, were slaughtered without mercy. Raiden himself was captured and sold as a slave. Standing now at the edge of a sea cliff, gazing toward a distant city glowing beneath the dying sun, he did not believe that becoming a treasure hunter, or receiving some so-called gift from the Great Moon, had anything to do with fulfilling the revenge he had sworn. If anything, he would simply pretend to follow the order, at least for now. As his gaze drifted across the sea, he noticed a large ship in the distance. Laughter echoed from it, fireworks burst into the sky, celebration spilling into the air. Raiden frowned. Why were they celebrating? Then realization struck him like lightning. That ship belonged to the chosen captain of the 7 archipelagos, the very ones who had once hunted down his parents. A voice rang out proudly from the ship, declaring that only those chosen by fate could receive the Heavenly King's protection through wealth. Radon's smile vanished. His expression turned pitch black. So this was it. He had finally found the bastards who murdered his parents, and now they had risen to power. He muttered coldly that the Heavenly King was spreading lies deliberately. Raiden knew the truth. The power those captains wielded did not come from wealth or divine favor. It came from a secret ritual, one that required the body parts of sea god kin. Only by sacrificing their flesh could one receive the power of the sea god, Clyde. Every captain of the 7 archipelagos had performed that ritual. As the laughter and fireworks continued, Raiden's breathing grew heavy. His eyes trembled with restrained fury. In a low, broken voice, he realized the final truth. Those damned hunters had split his parents' bodies into 7. The moment the realization struck, rage, joy, and confusion surged through him all at once. Even though Radon had never shared his story after being rescued by the Blue Moon, it now seemed as if the Great Moon had orchestrated everything from the very beginning, as if fulfilling a promise, granting him the chance for revenge. But opportunity did not mean immediacy. Objectively speaking, Radon was no match for the captains who wielded the power of Clyde. Though he was strong, it was not enough to defeat those who had reached the realm of superhumans. It did not take long for Leanne to realize the answer lay in the gift bestowed upon him by the Great Moon, the goggles of Amrita. They had the power to illuminate countless relics buried beneath the sea, making them easier to find. After discovering that some of these relics could compensate for the gap between himself and the captains of the 7 archipelagos, Radon understood. Everything had been planned from the start. At the same time, he grasped the true intention of the Great Moon, revenge and domination over the 7 archipelagos. From beginning to end, everything had been arranged. Lean muttered unconsciously for the Great Moon. Now when the words left his mouth, they carried true meaning. Only now did they signify loyalty. Scene transition. About 3 months had passed since the news of the 5th kid becoming a pirate had reached him. As the unbearable heat of summer began to fade and forest leaves turned red, Alan boarded a carriage. He was on his way to the Grand Church, held once every 2 years. He would have skipped it if he could. Thus he found himself traveling toward the Grand Church, soon to be joined by 2 other nobles. During the Grand Church season, mercenaries and bandits often targeted nobles. So to avoid any incidents from the start, the nobles increased their numbers and traveled together, and the day passed without any trouble. The problem arose that night. One of them sneered, "Count Palacio, is it really appropriate to travel with only a single guard? Is it a financial issue? If you're short on funds, I'd be happy to help." Another chimed in mockingly, "Ah, I see. You must have inherited your title in a hurry, and now your finances are in shambles." Until recently, the Eastern nobles had feared Alan, believing he was the true mastermind behind the destruction of Avalon, the organization that once ruled the Eastern underworld alongside Leo. Generation after generation, the Palacio counts had dominated the Eastern underworld, though the extent of their control varied over time. That dominance ended with Alan. Since he became count, the Palacio family had completely withdrawn from the underworld. As a result, the Eastern underworld fractured. Packs of wolves, groups that once survived on scraps outside Palacio's shadow, now fought viciously over the vacant territory. Some nobles began whispering that perhaps the current Count Palacio wasn't a mastermind at all, just someone who had inherited the title by chance. As years passed and Alan continued doing nothing, the rumor slowly solidified into accepted truth. Eventually, his reputation devolved into that of a lucky fool who had taken the seat meant for the real mastermind. Alan had expected indifference. He hadn't expected open mockery. Looking up, he studied the 2 nobles whose faces radiated smug satisfaction. He didn't recognize them personally, but the crests engraved on their carriages told him everything. One belonged to the Krilled Count family, the other to the Edorn Count family. "I see, this is a gathering of victims." The Palacio family's dominance had not only protected neighboring families, it had exploited them. In short, these 2 nobles weren't mocking Alan. They were venting their resentment toward Palacio. They scratched at him relentlessly like anonymous trolls lurking in online forums. Clearly, provoking him into reacting was exactly what they wanted, so Alan ignored them. There's no need to entertain fools, he decided. That night, Alan calmly ate 2 ears of roasted corn, letting their jeers fade into background noise. He noted idly that the corn tasted even better in the cool night air. It'd be perfect with butter, he thought. Far to the north, in a land no living being should have survived, a blizzard howled endlessly. The cursed land was painted in eternal gray by life-draining frost. A man lay fallen. Where his right arm should have been, only a crimson stain remained. His left eye socket was empty, blood frozen along his face. This man was Cleckhin, one of the 8 barbarian chieftains. Defeated by the Knights of Caliburn through cheap tricks, he now lay waiting for death. To a barbarian, dying in battle was glorious. What enraged Cleckhin was how he had been slain, caught in an ambush, deceived by a false challenge to a duel. Blood spilled from his mouth as the world blurred, the gray landscape faded, the bitter wind grew silent, and his consciousness slowly slipped away. Despite his rage, Cleckhin's mind slowly sank into darkness. Just as everything was about to fade into nothingness, he whispered the name of the great god Ultulrus. At that very moment, time seemed to stop. The dim, fading vision cleared. The harsh northern wind roared in his ears once again, and the consciousness that had been slipping away began to return. A voice echoed, "Call upon the great name you worshipped. Call upon my name and I shall grant you what you desire." As if compelled by a divine force, Cleckhin murmured in a trance, "Great god Ultulrus, I dare to call upon your honorable name." and in that moment the demon smiled. "Do that," it said, "and I shall grant your heart's desire." For the next few days, the uncomfortable coexistence continued. Every evening, Count Krild and Count Edorn would emerge to hurl their mocking remarks. And every time, Alan pretended not to care, brushing off their words as if they were nothing. The one who ignores and the one who desperately tries not to be ignored. Naturally, the one who ignored always won. Alan had deeply internalized a life lesson he once learned from a certain online community. Don't feed the trolls. At least here, no one could beat him at that game. After several days, "This is absurd," Count Krild growled, glaring at Alan from a distance. They were the ones doing the mocking, yet they were being ignored. That alone was infuriating. After a brief silence, the two exchanged low whispers. "Did you confirm it?" "Yes, it seems he truly has no additional guards." They continued quietly. Even with an artifact to secretly check, there was nothing, just that foolish brat and that rogue knight beside him. So the rumors are true after all. Their expressions darkened with certainty. "Then we can proceed with the plan." The two counts had been planning to expand into the underworld. They knew Alan had no interest in reclaiming it. Just as the two were about to rejoin the camp where the other nobles gathered, monsters appeared. The event unfolded suddenly. Under the cover of darkness, creatures emerged as if they had been lying in wait. A soldier spotted them by chance and shouted in alarm. Mercenaries and knights reacted immediately, drawing their weapons to protect the nobles. A wizard, extravagantly brought along by a noble for show, responded and cast an orb of light into the sky. The camp fell silent. What the light revealed froze everyone in place. Goblins. Goblins were common forest monsters. Even with their rusty swords and bows, seasoned knights could easily drive them away. Goblins only became troublesome when their numbers grew, but even dozens could be handled. What stood before them now was different. The forest was filled with them, and worse, these goblins were not normal. A knight's voice, trembling with fear and confusion, whispered, What on earth is that?" And among the horde, a massive goblin was savagely devouring the body of a seasoned mercenary who had been assigned to external surveillance. The sight sent a chill through everyone watching. This can't be happening. These mutated goblins were nothing like ordinary monsters. The knights gripping their weapons knew it instantly. This was a dire situation. The knights, those capable of sensing magic, noticed something else immediately. The goblins were imbued with magic. Even a small amount of mana inside a monster dramatically enhanced its physical abilities. As they grimaced at the goblins' distorted howls and braced for the impending charge, a wall of stone and rubble suddenly rose from the center of the goblin horde. All eyes snapped toward it. Before the knights could react, a translucent barrier formed behind the stone wall, a second-tier shield. Then a calm voice echoed across the battlefield. "Enhance." The barrier shimmered. "And compress." With a sharp cracking sound, the translucent sphere rapidly shrank, crushing inward. The stone wall warped violently as it collapsed into itself. Silence followed. Then came the sound of footsteps. The knights and mercenaries turned toward the noise. A man was walking forward, slow, steady, completely unfazed. Even in the midst of a life-and-death situation, his expression remained indifferent. Only then did they realize who it was. As Alan spoke again, the compressed shield in stone fully transformed into a rough, rock-like sphere about the size of a roadside stone. Returned to origin. The bracelet on his wrist emitted a faint gray light. The compressed mass detonated outward like a shotgun blast. Stone fragments tore through the goblin horde, shredding dozens of magic-infused bodies into chunks of flesh in an instant. Silence engulfed the battlefield. Nobles, knights, and mercenaries stood frozen, mouths agape, staring at what remained of the goblins. Count Krild and Count Edorn looked as though their eyes might tear themselves apart. Alan turned calmly toward them. "Stop standing there in a daze," he said. "Get ready." His voice carried no emotion. The knights and mercenaries raised their weapons. The fear that had been spreading through their ranks vanished as if it had never existed. The front lines held firm. Whenever goblins attempted to flank the nobles, Alan's magic erased entire detachments, tilting the fight decisively in their favor. There were casualties. Hundreds of mutated goblins were no small threat, but the losses were minimal considering the scale of the battle. It was over. As the soldiers confirmed the victory, they exhaled deeply and turned toward Alan. He stood among the corpses, staring down at them. Despite having fought in a life-or-death struggle, his expression remained unchanged, as if the battle had meant nothing. But inside, Alan was thinking something very different. "I almost died in a single strike." Though his face showed nothing, his heart was still racing wildly. Even with the insignia of the impure, allowing him to cast 3 times his normal output, after deploying walls and shields twice, he had been reduced to a mere mortal by the limits of his mana capacity. It's a good thing the knights won. The odds of defeat had been slim, even against mutated goblins, but once he lost his ability to defend himself, the fear had been very real. Then his gaze fell back onto one of the goblin corpses. His expression hardened. Purple amethyst protruded from its body. Alan knew exactly what that meant: divine descent, a rare and ominous phenomenon that occurred when an outer god attempted to descend into the world. Monsters affected by it became far more violent and far stronger. The current soldiers could handle the monsters on the road to the Duke's territory, but the fact that divine descent had occurred at all troubled him deeply. Ordinarily, outer gods could not descend unless one of the 5 great sins manifested. If these outer gods began rampaging, entire kingdoms could be erased. There were only 6 kingdoms on the continent, excluding the Empire. Alan's gaze remained fixed on the goblin corpse. But there were others whose expressions were even more severe. Count Krild and Count Edorn. Their faces reflected disbelief bordering on terror. They had witnessed something they could not comprehend. The next day they arrived at the Duke's estate. After enduring so many hardships, Alan wanted only one thing: to go home and sleep.